Assembly on December 8th, and it is 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll?
I will. Tim Hale.
Here.
Thank you. Stephanie Nowers.
Here.
Dee McKee. Robert Yunt.
Here.
Moki 2.
Here.
Jesse Sumner.
Here.
Ron Bernier. Assemblymember Bernier. You do have a quorum, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anything that any of the members would like to pull from the consent agenda? Dee, is that your hand in the air for us or for what you're trying to give him direction? He's going to fly away there. Okay, seeing and hearing nobody, then there's no changes to the agenda. And if you'd stand, and Coach, if you would lead us in the pledge. The flag is right here, everybody. Coach Nash, if you just say aye, we'll follow you.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So as you can see tonight, we have a number of young people here in the audience, and they are from the Colony football team, and we're going to honor them now.
You want me to come down and help you? Or you good?
I think I'm good. Thank you, though.
That's where you're going to stand. Perfect.
Okay. Hi. Come on out. You guys want to stand and face the audience so they can see what awesome football players look like? So I'm going to go ahead and read this, and then we have a plaque for you for your school. So, whereas the Colony Knights Division I football team is from Palmer High School in Palmer, Alaska. Woo!
Colony High School.
From Colony High School. See, they didn't even pick that up. That's awesome.
They're
nervous, something. It's not bad. We're not going to charge you any money or anything like that, okay? Whereas the Colony Knights mentor and coach is Robbie Nash, who was named the Division I Coach of the Year after leading the Knights to their Alaska State Division I football championship. Congratulations, you guys. Whereas the Colony Knights played an outstanding game, and with 17 seconds remaining, quarterback Jack Nash scored the winning touchdown, scoring a 14-7 victory over the previous unbeaten Juneau Huskies. And whereas this is Colony's first football championship title in the school's history, and the only second large school championship by a Mat-Su Valley team. Coach Nash says this is something for your whole community and is never going to forget. Then the community's never going to be able to forget it. It's hard to put it into words. Whereas multitude team players earned all state honors. How many of you earned all state honors? All right. The Mat-Su Borough community is extremely proud of the hard work, dedication, and talent that has motivated all of you to win this Alaska State Championship football title. And whereas it's my great pleasure to honor all of you tonight, and it is resolved that I, as mayor of the Mat-Su Borough, do hereby acknowledge and celebrate the achievements of the Colony football team, as well as my assembly members. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you a year from now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
it's the date. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of Assembly Member Yount to be my deputy mayor. Is there any objection from the Assembly? Hearing no objection, then congratulations. There are no meetings of the previous minutes, or no minutes of the previous meetings. Let's see, do we have a report from the cities? I don't see anyone. Report from the school district. Don't see anybody. I don't see Todd either. Is there anyone else here from the state of Alaska? I don't see anybody. Okay, and we have not had a joint assembly school board committee meeting. But next Tuesday night, the Borough Assembly and the whole elected body of the school district will be meeting. Are there any public relations reports? And Assembly Person Ron, are you online yet? Okay. All righty. Then the next item on our agenda is the manager's comments.
Hi, Mayor.
Oh, yes. Go
I'm there.
ahead, sir. Oh, okay. And do you know approximately what time you came on, sir?
6:01.
Okay. Thank you very much. And-
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be very brief tonight. I just wanted to ask the Assembly for their consent on having the next strategic planning special meeting. We hold those typically once a year on a Saturday, typically at the Menard, just to kind of talk about some of those more strategic items and get direction from the Assembly. I would propose that being Saturday, March 4th, if that is good or bad. I'm trying to work around at 10 a.m. I'm trying to work around Mr. Hale's slope schedule a little bit here. And I think that's a weekend he is back in town. I see a grimace over there from the newly appointed deputy mayor.
It's the state middle school wrestling championships. I can call in. Let's leave it. I would rather Tim be in here in person. So that's fine.
How Assembly Person Hale, do you just have that one Saturday, or you have like maybe the following Saturday or the Saturday previous to that?
Madam Mayor, I should have 2 weeks at that time, starting at that time.
So then, and I don't know what your schedule is, manager. Would March 11th work out better? Okay, and Assembly Person hours, I saw you had your light on.
I was just going to ask if we could maybe find a different venue. The Menard's been okay, but it's not great for sound. And the layout of the room is really channeled. So in terms of like sort of taking community input and being around a table, I know it's a challenge always to find good spaces. I don't know if the Borough building would be available if that's a challenge, but just if that's the only thing that's available and convenient, fine. I just have noted that the last 2 times, and I think I had to call in last time, and it's just a bit of a challenge with the sound.
Okay. Do we know if this room is available, sir?
We don't, but we can take a look. The clerk and I can get together and find it and look at different venue options if we have consent for Saturday, March 11th at 10 a.m.
Okay, Assemblyperson McKee, do you have comment?
Yeah, I do. I don't honestly know when spring break starts. And we often are not in town on spring break.
Mhm.
And I don't know, does anybody out there know when spring break is this year? You kids ought to know.
So that would be.
Nick said he's going to find out, so.
Spring breaks.
Night.
Spring break starts, March 9th.
Starts
It
when?
starts on March 9th.
March 10th, which is Friday.
Friday.
Okay, so it's-
Okay.
you're talking about the 4th, which was the week before, and that's
No,
okay?
we're talking about the 11th now because Deputy Mayor can't be here on the 4th. So you'd have to postpone for a day. Because it starts on the 10th, and if we meet on the 11th, you just have to leave the evening of the 11th instead of the evening of the 10th.
Oh, you're just so convincing. Okay. All right, I can do that.
Thank you very much for
Yeah.
your cooperation. Okay, and the manager will get back to us to be absolutely sure and about the venue. Alrighty, go ahead, sir. Oh, that's all you have? Okay. Any questions from any of the assembly members to the manager? We're probably going to embarrass a few people tonight. Yesterday, Pearl Harbor Day was his 2nd year anniversary with the borough. And so, you thought we did enough for you today with the cookies and a few things like that. So anyway, well, you know the saying, if you don't enjoy where you work, then you got to find someplace else. So we enjoy where we work. Now, maybe that doesn't extend to you, but Assemblyperson McKee, do you still have comments?
Oh,
Okay. All righty. Mr. Attorney, do you have a report for us?
Very briefly, I was talking with Assemblymember Hale, I believe last week or the week before. As you all remember, a couple of years ago, there was a advisory ballot question on whether the borough should explore law enforcement powers or police powers. There was a task force. There was a report as a result of that. But what Assemblymember Hale was talking to me about was the formation of service areas. And the formation of a service area could be for any power that we don't currentally exercise. He's asked me to make a presentation on January 17th when he's back in town, which I will be doing. So I'm just letting the Assembly members know. I'll have maybe a 20-minute report on that night, January 17th, to talk about the ways that service areas in general get formed, with an eye, of course, towards the police question, but how they get formed from a legal perspective.
Okay.
And then my only other thing is to mention to the Assembly, I've been approached by the Russian Orthodox Archdiocese of Alaska to assist them with some legal help, mostly document review, nothing involving my signature on anything, no formal representation in court or administrative agencies. And so I've told them a couple of things. One, I would be willing to do it pro bono because that's what they were asking for, was for free. As long as the Assembly is okay with it and there was no objection from anybody, and that I wouldn't be doing anything regarding properties that might be coming to the borough for a permit or development or anything like that. But they have properties, of course, all over the state and contractors and leases and things like that. And they just need somebody to kind of walk them through a few things. I would do it on my personal time, my personal email account, things like that. So I won't, commingle any of that stuff. I've consulted the professional rules of professional responsibility, encourage and allow this type of thing. There's ethics opinions out there on how to manage all that, and I'll be following all those rules. I wanted to make sure that nobody on the Assembly had an objection to me doing that before I formally tell them yes. And again, just give them kind of advice, mostly talking, no signatures, no formal representation.
Okay. Now, Madam Clerk, do we just note that for the record, or do I ask for Assembly comments, or is it just noted and that's it?
Madam Mayor, I do believe you can ask if there's any objection.
Okay. Alrighty, is there any objection? Okay, thank you.
Comment.
Alrighty. Madam Clerk?
The clerk's report is in your red folder. It has next Tuesday's joint meeting agenda with the school district. And just a reminder, that meeting is over at the school district and not here. And also, just to remind the assembly, I haven't heard anything yet in reference to giving me ideas on what you would like me to present on, or questions you may have for the January 17th election meeting.
Thank you. So now I get to embarrass a couple more people. On Tuesday night, this week is an organization that we belong to called Alaska Municipal League, and it's made up of all the municipalities throughout the state, and they had their conferences last week. And on Tuesday, the clerks met, and one of the things they do, two of the things they do, is they acknowledge the clerk of the year, and then they also install a new president for the coming year. And so Lonnie was recognized as the clerk of the year. As a surprise to her, I think there was only probably about 6 people that I know of that knew. And so we were very happy to nominate her and have her receive that award. And then also Brenda, the lady sitting next to her, who is one of our deputy clerks, was just installed as a president for the Alaska Association of Clerks for the coming year. So we have put the Matsu Borough on notice regarding this state of, and around the state of Alaska regarding how well we're taken care of. So anyway, let's give them a hand. So when I had encouraged a couple of weeks ago I couldn't tell you why it would be nice for you guys to be there on Tuesday night, because it was a quota surprise. But anyway, it was very well attended and it's very well deserved. The next item on our agenda is citizens and other correspondence. Are there any comments on the citizens and other correspondence from any of the assembly members? Okay, hearing none, then they are presented. And Madam Clerk, would you read the IMs into the record?
I will. IM 22-249, informing the assembly that the borough entered into a letter of agreement with the Matanuska-Susitna Borough Employees Association, reducing the time time for an employee has to wait before utilizing accrued personal leave. IM 22-250, informing the assembly of the manager's signature on and submittal of an Alaska State Library continuing education grant application. IM 22-251, informing the assembly of the manager's signature on and submittal of an Alaska Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management application for reallocation of Homeland Security grant program funding.
Are there any comments on the IMs? Yes, Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
I don't know to what degree I'm allowed to comment here, but I do have, I was going to ask some questions about the
Sure.
the leave time thing.
Sure, go ahead.
So can I go and ask?
Yes, you may.
Okay, first of all, how long is a probationary period?
Go ahead,
Through the
sir.
mayor to Ms. McKee, I believe it's 1 year probationary period. The previous agreement had an employee having to wait 6 months
Right.
prior to being able to use accrued personal leave. This reduces that to 90 days or 3 months.
And they got 16 hours in there anyway, even under the old thing where they got, yeah. Generally speaking, 'cause I used to do union contracts and all that sort of thing. When you are a probationary employee, you can be let go because they don't like the color of your shoes or something like that. What happens if you have given them this leave and they've used it, and that's an expenditure of funds on a probationary employee who's totally at will? What, they get it back, or the borough get it back, or the school, whoever these folks are? Yeah, the borough.
Nick's shaking his head. I'm going to defer.
No, because leave begins to accrue the day you start working. So you get it in your leave bank. You're not authorized to then take it. So you have to take leave without pay for the first 3 months.
Okay.
So while you're on your probationary period, if you avail yourself of the benefits and then you don't work out, it's a little more than we don't like the color of your shoes
Oh, I know.
in Alaska. But no, if the leave is used, it's used. Moreover, because of the way the laws work, if you are terminated or leave before probation is over, the unaccrued leave gets cashed out and paid to you because it's a negotiated benefit.
I was going to ask that. So
Yeah.
something that just builds up. Okay, thanks very much. That's all I was asking about.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion on the IMs? Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, then they are presented. The next item is special orders, and we do not have any requests from people to be heard. The next item is our public hearings, and Madam Clerk, would you read the first one?
Ordinance 22078, an ordinance adopting MSB 1524030 Beverly Lake Management Plan and amending MSB 17.59 Lake Management Plan implementation. If you're on the phone and you would like to speak to this, press *3.
Okay, so the madam, we have staff. Oh, yes, there she is. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Assembly members, Madam Mayor, Manager Brown, and staff. My name is Kelsey Anderson. I'm a long-range planner with the Matsu Borough. And for the last year, I've been working with the residents of Beverly Lake on a Beverly Lake Management Plan. It's been a while since any assembly has used this growth management tool, so I just wanted to start off by giving you some quick facts about lake management planning in general before going into the specifics of Beverly Lake and the process. So lake management plans are just one of the tools that you as assembly members have to manage conflicts that result from rapid growth and sporadic development. Much like our LID code, the lake management plan process is a democratic process that allows residents of a specific lake to initiate and design a plan based on their individual needs as a community. So lake management plans are a way for residents to ask for Borough Assembly to help when their conflicts have surpassed the point of neighbor-to-neighbor resolution. So since 1995, Borough Assemblies have adopted 41 lake management plans into code, 6 of which are within the Meadow Lakes Community Council area. That's where Beverly Lake is located. In 1999, the Borough Assembly worked with the Alaska Department of Fish and Games to establish guidelines for regulations that are found in lake management plans, and these guidelines are based on the shape, size, and depth of a lake. For lakes that are 75 surface acres or smaller, they recommend that lake management plans include a no-wake zone, limited horsepower, quiet hours, and no personal motorized watercraft. These regulations are designed to protect lake home property values from unnecessary shoreline erosion, conserve habitat for fish and wildlife, and to maintain the peaceful nature of smaller lakes. So this is the category of recommended regulations that Beverly Lake falls under because Beverly Lakes is 42 surface acres with an average depth of 9 feet. Beverly Lake also has an oval shape, which makes dispersing the energy of wakes from jet skis or high-powered boats just more difficult. The process for initiating a lake management plan is clearly defined in Title 15 of Borough Code. A majority of property owners must first sign a petition, and then a majority must cast a ballot in favor of initiating a lake management plan. The process to get the plan from the initiation phase to the adoption phase is less clear. So my department director, Alex Strawn, and I developed a department policy to bring clarity into the process where there wasn't really any. This included adding an additional voting process to give residents a final chance to voice their opinion and to decide if the plan should actually be moved forward to the Planning Commission and the Assembly. So for the Beverly Lakes process specifically, the Lake Management Chapter of Code has 6 sections to it, but they can really be consolidated into 3 steps. So that's how I'm just going to talk about how me as staff worked through this process and then how the residents also showed up for their portion of the requirements. So first, the code requires a valid petition, and a valid petition means that at least 50% of all property owners within 600 feet of the shoreline sign a petition asking the planning department to initiate a lake management plan. So I received a valid petition from residents of Beverly Lake in November of 2021. 53% of residents signed the petition in favor of starting a lake management plan process. The second part in code requires an initiation ballot to be sent to all residents, once again, within that 600-foot buffer from shoreline. So letters went out to all the parcels on December 3rd, 2021. I gave them 60 days to return their ballot to the borough. 59 ballots were returned to the planning department. So of those, 37 were in support of initiating a lake management plan, which provided a 62% majority for the first ballot. Once the ballots were tallied, I sent out a letter to all the property owners explaining the results and providing the first notice for the scheduled public meetings. I also posted a public notice at the public access point for Beverly Lake. The third step that's outlined in code is public participation. So the final step for initiating a lake management plan that's found in code is this public participation requirement. And there's really only two pretty broad things that we're required to do as planners for this process. And that is all meetings must be open to the public and that they must be noticed in a local publication. So all of our meetings that we had were noticed in the Frontiersman, and they were open to the public to attend, and we had members of the public there. In addition to meeting the minimum requirements for public participation, I facilitated 3 public meetings. 2 of them were in person with a virtual component. And then there was also a third one that was strictly virtual. Each of them lasted about 3 hours. I developed a web page that was launched before the first meeting and has been continuously updated with new information, draft documents, things like that to keep the residents informed. I sent several update emails to Assemblymember Bernier and the Meadow Lakes Community Council, as well as updating the manager and the mayor and my general team just to what's going on. I sent 15 emails to the residents of Beverly Lake and sent an extra mailer as well to remind them of the final meeting. I also put information in the planner platform, published 3 Facebook posts, and overall I received around 35 written comments from members of the Beverly Lakes community. So that's a lot, and I just wanted to be specific about all the effort that went into the public outreach, because I think it's important for you all to understand that the residents of the Beverly Lake community had many opportunities from February to the final ballot process in May to become involved, voice their opinions, and to work together to find consensus around this plan. So the final ballot process, we've got a lot of awesome people here that are going to talk to you about, I'm guessing, more of the issues that they went through in the process and why they love their lake and all of those awesome things. So I'm really just trying to stick to the process here today and let them fill you in on their great community. So the final ballot process, as I mentioned, the Borough Code stops at public participation for initiating lake management plans. So Director Strawn and I developed some guidance for the final steps that I was going to take with the community here. So after the first 2 public meetings, all the participants asked for a third meeting where we would agree on the regulations to put into the plan and take a final vote on whether or not residents wanted me to take the plan to the assembly. Director Strawn and I thought this was a fair way to move forward, to give residents that final and third vote to try to give them a little bit more time to come to consensus and work together. During the third meeting, it became very clear that there was not going to be any compromise between the 2 camps of people. On one side, there were residents who felt very strongly that including a no wake zone and a ban on jet skis was the right decision for the lake management plan, and the other group who did not want the plan. So in an effort to keep the meeting productive and not let it spiral out of control, I pivoted to suggest that we move to a ranked choice ballot, where instead of voting on whether or not they wanted me to bring the plan forward, we had 3 regulation options that they then ranked in favor of this is the one I want the most, to this is the one I don't want at all. So the group agreed to move forward with the new ballot process. So I mailed those out on May 6th. The final vote had 3 options that residents could rank. And the regulation packages were developed by 2 different groups of residents. So I didn't come up with the regulations that are included in the lake management plan, the residents did. So the first option, which is included in the plan as it's written, was option A with a 150-foot no wake zone, a ban on jet skis, 15 horsepower limit, and quiet hours. The second option was option B. This was our attempt at compromise. It had a timeshare for motorized use in jet skis and quiet hours. The third option, option C, was to not have a plan. This was the people who didn't want a lake management plan. This was their opportunity to vote against bringing it to the assembly. And it seemed like the natural option because it was the status quo. There would essentially be no change to how people could recreate on Beverly Lake. So the final vote was predictable in the sense that not a single person voted for the compromise. No one chose option B as their first choice, so I didn't have to do any sort of ranked ballot, whatever. Like, it was very clear there was a majority winner. So I mailed 84 ballots, 70 were returned, and 54% of all the respondents voted for option A as their first choice. Taking that one step further, is 52% of all respondents who own just shoreline property also voted for option A as their first choice. Once the final ballots were hand counted by myself and 2 other staff, I finalized the draft plan to include the regulations voted on by the majority of both all voting parties as well as the shoreline property owners. So to recap, there is a process, right, that is defined in Borough Code that acts as a tool for the assemblies to help communities solve land use conflicts only when asked for by a majority of the community. The residents fulfilled their duties by submitting a valid petition and having a majority vote in favor of initiating a lake management plan, as well as being incredibly active throughout the entire public participation phase of this plan. Borough staff fulfilled their duties as outlined in code and policy and exceeded those requirements whenever possible, whenever I could. The majority of residents within the 600-foot buffer voted to have a lake management plan with restrictions on jet skis, quiet hours, wake zones, and motorized use. The majority of shoreline property owners also voted in favor of this. So it's with that information that staff recommends the Assembly adopt the Beverly Lake Management Plan into Title 15 and its accompanying regulations into Title 17. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Assemblyperson Summer.
Yeah, so in here it says that 42 shoreline property owners voted. How many shoreline property owners are there total?
44.
44?
Yeah.
And then I guess I'm a little bit actually unfamiliar with this ordinance because we don't really do these very often. But in our LID process, it's not a majority of return ballots. It's a majority of
Correct.
total eligible folks to vote. Is that actually different in this process?
So the thing that's different in this process is that our lake management code doesn't actually follow through to implementation. It's just initiation. So that's why Director Strawn and I tried to come up with some good guidelines to finish this project because we haven't done one in 8 years, I believe. So the LID does have a very strict, you have to have a certain percentage for the Assembly to adopt it. We were just kind of going along the lines of the previous two, the ballot and the petition to have at least 50%.
Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, as mentioned, there's not been one in a long time, so I don't think anybody up here has helped in this process.
That's
So
okay.
did I hear you right, that the borough is not involved through implementation? Is that correct? Is that what you said? We don't participate in the implementation?
No, we do definitely, but the implementation is the regulations.
Yeah.
So we definitely are involved in that part through code enforcement, through Title 17. What I meant was that the code outlining the process to get the plan to this point, to a public hearing, is not outlined. Yeah, so there,
thank
we
you. That's
gave
better.
them a third vote
okay.
to get like an extra consensus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further question? Yes, Assemblyperson McKee.
So there's actually two votes when the people, residents.
Mic on?
I'm sorry, I thought sometimes it's on when it shouldn't be in here. Anyhow, so the first one was, so the people who were interested in it initiated the thing where they said, okay, we want to do the petition. That was the first vote.
Yes.
The second vote was, okay, now we've got these three plans in place. What do you think? That's, and I understand, but those were two separate votes on, shall we do it at all? And how many of us really want to do it? Kind of like?
So there was three options essentially to cast a vote. The first was the petition. The second was a ballot, it was a quick, yes, I want to initiate a lake management plan, or no, I do not. So there was that. And then the final ballot was, here's different regulation packages to choose, or I don't want a plan. So it was two regulation options and then no plan as the third option. Yeah.
I have, this is Ron.
Sure, go ahead, Assemblyperson, go ahead.
So the total of shoreline parcels are 44, is that correct?
There are 44 shoreline parcels, yes.
And is there 40 more parcels that are involved that are within 600 feet then,
Correct.
for a total of 84?
Yep.
Okay. Out of the 84 sent out, you received 70?
Did he say 70? 70, yes, we received back.
Okay. And that's where the 54%
Correct.
comes in? Okay.
Further questions, sir?
Out of those 44 lots, there's 42 different owners? Is that correct? Or
I believe that there is 35 property owners between the 40 or the 44 shoreline parcels. Does that make sense? Like,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
some people own multiple lots.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, because I think
Okay.
I remember reading that there was one gentleman or one person, somebody that owns like 6 lots or something like that. That isn't part of that 44.
Correct.
Yeah.
That person is not part of the 44 shoreline owners.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, further questions, Assemblyperson Ron?
No. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Two questions. So one, 54% voted yes at the end. What was the percentage that voted yes to move forward in the beginning?
62%.
62.
Yeah.
So 62% of people, safe to say, wanted something, but when something came back, it dropped to 54% would approve. Okay. And the other question I have is, there's 44 lots on the lake with 35 owners. Could be 9 people with 2, could be somebody with 3 or 4. Do they get to vote more than once?
You
Do
get
you vote
one
once
vote,
per parcel or one per?
one vote per parcel.
Can you give us the numbers on that?
Probably. For shoreline owners, let me see here. 20 people, not ballots. So of the shoreline property owners, 20 people voted for option A and 15 voted for option C, which was no plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions of staff? Okay.
I do.
Oh, yes.
Ron again.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Out of the other 40, I believe, what was that outcome of the people that aren't on the shoreline?
I don't know that I understand that question.
What I think he's trying to get to is the not the votes, but the parcel owners that are not on the shoreline.
Okay, the breakdown of how many people, not ballots, within the 600-foot buffer.
I
Is-
believe that is, Ron, is that what you're trying to obtain, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, that was an even split. 25 people voted for option A and 25 people voted for option C to have no plan.
Okay. So those, okay.
Split
So-
there.
So split 50-50 then on that. Okay. For the question of anybody that else, either Ron or anyone else that's online? Assemblyperson Hale?
I do not have any questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Assemblyperson Sumner?
Actually, I have a question. So would those lots have to be subdivided through our subdivision process, or could they be condo platted, and were any condo platted? Because I mean, you could condo plat your lot into 100 little tiny pieces. Would you get 100 votes?
I don't really know how to answer that. I mean, from what I know of the lake and its residents, they're single family homes like throughout the entire lake. And so looking forward for other lake management plans, that might be an issue to take up through the process. And as we're going through it, I don't think it really pertains to Beverly Lake, as it's one vote per parcel and they're like single family homes.
They may be condo platted if they didn't conform to our subdivision requirements, which depending on, I mean, they probably were platted a long time ago, but now we have like a minimum lake frontage requirement, for instance.
I'm getting back up.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Alex Strawn, Planning Director. I'm hoping Nick is kind of looking this up too. I think it depends on how the code is worded. So if you'd give me just a moment here.
Mm-hmm.
Number to all property owners. One notice per parcel.
So I'm not sure we'll be able to answer this question right here. It says one notice per parcel. If it was in Title 17, we have a good definition of what a parcel is, but we do not have a definition section within Title 15. So it probably refers to, like we'd go to Black's Law Dictionary or something. It may be a gray area that we'd have to make a determination. I'm not sure if we have a good solid answer for you standing up here.
Go ahead, Mr. Attorney.
Lake management, 1759 is the process.
So 1524 is the process for initiating. 1759 is the implementation.
And as some member Summer, is your concern about the future or about the present?
Well, about the present, so if under our definition of a parcel, would we consider a condo platted parcel to be separate parcels for the purpose of voting, or one?
Well, the first thing for the present would be to take a look around the lake and see if there are any. And I don't know if there are or not. I mean, that would be the first step. I got somebody out here whispering from the audience that there aren't any condo plats filed around the lake. And if there aren't any, then it doesn't really matter.
Okay, Assembly Person McKee, did you have some comments?
I do, but at what point do the folks in the audience get up and,
When we finish and release the staff person to go back to their seat, I'll open the public hearing. So if you want to wait till after the public has testified, we will have an opportunity at that time for the assembly to ask questions and
Okay.
discussion.
then I'll
Okay.
wait. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor, did you have a question at this time?
No, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm taking notes.
Okay, all right.
I move to adopt ordinance
No, 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 no,
22078.
no,
All
no.
right, public,
We're
comment.
not-
I'm
Yeah, we
sorry.
have to do the public hearing first. So, yeah, not quite ready. All righty, so I think,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Kelsey, can you leave that on, please? Thank you.
Okay, so I will now open the public hearing. And we do have a sign-up sheet. And so what our policy is that I will really go down the people that have signed up. And then at the end, there will be ample opportunity for either people that are online or people that are here to testify. So even if you didn't sign up, you'll still have an opportunity to testify. So when I call your name, if you come up and you have 3 minutes, and the clerk will put up the timer on the screen for you. So, okay, Tisha Link. Mhm. I'm sorry, ma'am. Okay, yes, and state your name for the record, please. Uh-huh. Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, my name is Tish Link, L-I-N-K. In the past many meetings that we have had, 3 main topics have been discussed. The first is aircraft. This in no way, shape, or form has any barrier on aircraft whatsoever. That is done by the FAA, has nothing to do with what we're trying to do here. Secondly, will property values be affected if there is a lake management plan versus if there is not? Jesse Tanner wrote in a letter. I hope you guys had a chance to read that. If not, I'll summarize it anyways. He is somebody who lives out here, has been in the business for over 20 years. It is Kristen Cole's son, and he now owns his own business. And just to summarize what he said is the Valley real estate market is at a point where lakefront property has and will continue to see absolute premiums because of its limited supply. The types of restrictions will only be a matter of personal preference. So if you want lake motorized or not. And the last thing that we keep seeing is why would you move to a motorized lake and then not want it motorized? And to that, I want to show you these here. What we did was these maps are printed out here at the Borough. This is 2 code. They are both at the same scale. Beverly Lake, as you can see, is much smaller. It is only 42 acres, and we tried to compare it to Wasilla Lake, mostly because not everyone is familiar with Beverly, but most are familiar with Wasilla, and you can tell by the size. Wasilla Lake is over 370 acres. So if I am looking into researching where I want to live, I'm going to see that, yeah, you know what? Beverly Lake is unrestricted, but it's also 42 acres. It's barely over a half a mile long. I'm not going to think that I should put something large on there. That's probably going to be good for my, 5 to 10 horsepower motor to go fishing, my party barge, my kayak, my paddleboard, that type of stuff. But the motto here is just because you can doesn't mean you should. However, not all agree, obviously. It has been over the past 3 years that an increase in population has created an increase over the conflicts of the way we're using our lake. Multiple jet skis, larger motorboats have frequented the lake these last few years, and it is this exact reason that the lake management plan came into effect. Shoreline dock damage, personal safety of kids in kayaks getting swamped by wakes, a mom and her small child on a paddleboard who didn't feel safe with wakes, and finally, wildlife changes and concerns for our federally protected loons. Their nests that can be swamped easily out by wakes. As you can see here in this picture, the loons nest directly on the lake's shore. That is not unusual. This is very common for them. It is in my opinion that all of these issues are rooted in the fact that Beverly Lake is too small to accommodate the marine traffic that the residents are trying to put on it. One jet ski or large motor boat driven straight down the middle of this little lake will create a wake on both sides that hit the shoreline. But none of this really matters unless you live on Beverly Lake. So what matters is we followed the borough process as best as we could. We voted, and in every single vote, it was over 50%, regardless of what that meant. Thank you.
Brittany?
My name is Brittany Elsauce. Thank you all for having us here. Sorry, I'm not so great at public speaking. I feel like the overall outcome of the Planning Commission meeting that we had last been to was very disappointing to the Beverly Lake community who voted on having a lake management plan when the borough put out a ballot and it passed. I felt that would be like us, just as a community voting in you as assembly members. And let's say, just say for example, the mayor stepped in and said, oh, well, I really don't like this candidate or what she's saying or he's saying or what they're trying to accomplish. So how about, never mind, we're just pulling him or her from the seat regardless of what the community voted on and wanted.
Do I get to do that?
Example, but not everyone will like the outcome of the vote, but it should be respected. And all I'm asking is that the assembly members today respect the process that we went through, and we followed the borough's process to get here. And please respect the vote that we took that clearly indicated that the Beverly Lake community wants a lake management plan. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Carol?
Hello, I'm Carol Tillett. One of the concerns that some of the lake residents had against a lake management plan was that they were under the impression that property values will be less if we do have a plan. This appeared to be the deciding factor for the Mat-Su Planning Commission decision. In fact, a real estate agent will cater to their client who wants to buy lakefront property. If you want serenity and wildlife, then you want to buy on this lake. If there's no regulations, you can certainly use this lake for your large watercraft. Real estate agents are salesmen. I have an email that you should have a copy of from Buddy Eveland. He's our Mat-Su property assessor who attests to the opposite. So I'll read from that email. I asked, does having a lake management plan or having motorized recreational equipment on the lake or not affect our property values and assessment? He responded, the borough is striving to assess at full and true value. To date, we have not observed any market data that has indicated a lake property with a management plan would sell differently than one without. This doesn't mean that a lake management plan won't make lake property more desirable in the future and possibly sell at a higher price than one without. Mat-Su management planners have already put together researched and well thought out proposed plans. What we're asking for is to acknowledge that effort and to realize for a lake that's just over 40 acres, it makes sense to go with the borough's own plan. Late this fall, several of us, including myself, witnessed an incident with a speedboat in a tight circle formation at the exact spot where the loons live. This was maintained for at least 10 minutes, maybe longer. This fellow then returned to the ramp to pick up 4 children and proceeded to the loons at the edge of the lake, which is where they nest, and they were overheard yelling, kill them. We have many witnesses and 2 videos of this. I can see the loons daily in the exact spot out my window. After that day, I saw 1, not a pair. This is cruel and criminal behavior and should not be offered to children as acceptable. It's clearly retaliatory in response to possibly losing what they feel is an entitlement. Although particularly egregious, this is not an isolated incident, and typically unsupervised children are causing the problems. Many of us have witnessed direct loon aggression many times. Signs indicating protected species posted in the area are always removed. State troopers, fish, wildlife, fish and game, Mat-Su have all been contacted for help by lake residents about wildlife protection, as well as sustained extreme noise, safety incidents, and involving other lake users on non-motorized watercraft swimming or fishing. With the resources we have available to us, it appears enforcement is difficult. This is another reason why we beseech you to award us the borough's own recommended lake management plan for our small neighborhood. Thanks for hearing us.
Thank you. Les?
Good evening. I'm going to abbreviate some of mine because some of the talking points have already been addressed. I think the key one here is the size of Beverly Lake. Half the size of what the borough's planning department classifies as a small lake. And the reason for that classification is under a certain size, motorized vehicles simply are not compatible with other uses. I'm sure all of you have lived up here for many years. You've all been fishing at one point or a time. And when you're fishing and a speedboat goes past, there's no fishing there for the next 30 minutes, next hour, maybe for the rest of the day. Fishing on a small lake is not compatible with motorized vehicles. There are a lot of other uses on that lake. A lot of people swim in the lake. Paddle boards, canoeing, kayaking. If you're on a paddle board and you're out there and a jet ski goes by, you're ending up in the water. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Same thing with kayaks. We've had people in canoes in there that are being swamped, that have been swamped by the jet skis. We've had large ocean type boats on the lake running around. And the lake just is not big enough for multiple use like that. So you have to take a look and say, what is compatible uses for it? We've got 10 possible uses and one, and that one is not compatible with the other 10. Fishing game stocks the lake each year with trout. You can catch up to, I've caught personally 2 21-inch rainbows out of there. Great eating. And we're bringing the family out for the weekend for canoes, kayaks, the little Chris Craft sailboats. It's a great way to spend the evening with the family or the day with the family or a weekend. There's lots of larger lakes in the borough that you can jet ski on, and where there's plenty of room to have designated areas, swimming over here, fishing over in this area, powered watercraft over in this area. Beverly Lake is simply too small for it. And that's why the borough's guidelines and most of the people on the lake agree. No motorized vehicles, limited for like the little party boats, 15 horsepower to chug around on the lake and fish off of. But otherwise, please, no big boats on, or no big boats, no jet skis on the lake. It eliminates anybody else from being able to utilize the lake. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Olga?
Hi, I'm Olga Losik. So last time we were here, we had a management, we had a planning committee meeting and they agreed with us. I'm speaking against the planning, against the lake management. So neighbors that want to ban all motor activities, they said that wildlife decreased. That's truly not, it's not true. We had like swans this year with me having 5 babies. We have balloons every day, every night. We hear them. Ducks, we ride by ducks. So that hasn't changed. So we would never bought a house and invested into our house and bought a property next to it on the lake if it wasn't allowed any motors, because we have 4 kids and we like using it. So our neighbors saying that it's really loud, it's constantly used by jet skis and boats, it's simply not true. Like this summer, maybe like 2-3 times that somebody used a jet ski. Last summer, maybe at the most, the whole summer, maybe like 5 to 10 days at the most for a couple hours, anybody ever used that lake. So when we came up with when we had meetings before, we wanted to compromise. We wanted to do even in odd days for days where people could use motors, the days that people could not use motors. So that way it could be even. But the other side would not agree with any of us. So they just kept. So another thing with Kelsey, so many times that she changed her ideas. First, she said has to be 60 to 70% votes in order for us to move on to the planning commission to assembly. Then it got changed into 50% votes. It was changed so many times. Our last meeting all together, we agreed that we're gonna vote right there and there. And a lot of us showed up that were against the lake management.
And because there were so many of us that spoke against it, she changed her mind and she's like, no, we're not going to vote today. We're going to send a letter to all of us. So many things changed. Somebody spoke about one person, one realtor that said that lake property values will not change. We asked 7 different realtors and appraisers, and they all said 10 to 20% decrease of value usually, or on lake that doesn't have, so it's more value when you don't have any lake management plan, so people could use their boats. So are we asking you if we, for all of us that we purchased our properties, build our homes, to change now, either we need to be grandfathered into what we bought in, or have a compromise, but thank you. And also, a couple of people wanted to call in and they said they can't get on there. So they want to be on the phone to speak also. I don't know, but they said they can't. So
We do have somebody holding, waiting to
okay.
talk. They need to, if they can't, they need to call back in and hit *3.
Okay. She said they should try it like a few times and she couldn't do it. Okay.
Does she have the right number? Do you know? Okay, because out on the agenda out there would be the correct number, just so be sure she's calling in or they're calling into the correct number. So, or you want to put it on the record? Yeah.
For people that are listening, it's 1-855-225-2326, and you hit *3. Again, that is 1-855-225-2326.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
Good evening. I'm going to try to be very short. I just want to point out that whoever owns any motorized, like a jet ski or boat, I never saw like really anybody abusing the lake with their jet ski or motor vehicles. And again, our summers are very short, and people use their jet ski again, like this year. I personally, with my kids, we use 2 hours of the summer because it was rainy, the weather wasn't very good. So I think people who owns are very respectful of the lake and really considerate of the neighbors and so on. So I just want to point that out, that nobody's really trying to abuse that lake. Everybody is really respectful to the wildlife. And I think a lot of points that have been said before, who want to implement the lake management, I kind of doubt that not a lot of them are really true, what they are stating. So kind of that's what I want to point out. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Craig Odom?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the Assembly. We, the people, the residents who live on Beverly Lake, wanted to know how to go about the possibility of establishing a lake management plan. We were referred to the Borough Planning Department. Kelsey Anderson informed us the borough has a process that needed to be followed as established by the Mat-Su Borough Assembly. We, the people, followed this process. We, the people, obtained the required signatures to get a lake management plan process started as established by the Mat-Su Borough Assembly. Ms. Anderson coordinated and facilitated a few LMP meetings with the residents of Beverly Lake. There was no consensus and no compromise on an LMP. While some residents of Beverly Lake wanted an LMP, others did not. Having an LMP would come down to a vote of the people. Kelsey mailed out the ranked choice voting ballots. When the ballots were counted, the results were clear. And I quote from Ms. Anderson's email dated 27 May 2022, the final ballot results are in for Beverly Lake Management Plan, and we will be introducing the Beverly Lake Management Plan with Option A regulations at the June 6 Planning Commission meeting. As you know, it was ranked choice voting. However, not a single resident chose Option B as their first choice. which this meant that there was a clear majority winner by counting each ballot's first preference. You guys already heard this earlier. I don't know how Kelsey got my notes, but anyway. This is still America. We, the people, and the will of the people have spoken through the democratic process of voting. We, the people, have voted, and the will of the people have elected to implement the lake management plan as written in option A for Beverly Lake. Please remember, each of you sitting here today on the Borough Assembly were elected by a vote of the people to put you in the position that you hold on the Mat-Su Borough. We, the people, followed your rules, your policies that you put in place, obey the will of the people, and follow your policies that you put in place for us. Please implement and adopt this LMP. Respectfully, Craig Odom.
Thank you.
Excuse me, can I ask that gentleman's name? I didn't get the name.
He said Craig Odom.
Thank you.
Mhm. That's okay, no problem. Then Paul Schwartz. Is that?
The deaf guy. So my primary focus, Mayor and members.
Your name, sir,
I'm sorry?
please.
Your name.
Your name, sir,
Oh,
please. for-
Paul Schruntz. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for this opportunity to speak. My primary purpose was, as in prior meetings, it was brought up by a few people that there was concern regarding how a lake management plan may affect property values, how personal watercraft, large boats, and any subsequent issues that may arise by use of those on the lake may affect property values. So I endeavored to do a little research on that, and what I found very quickly that spanned multiple states across the United States, and I cited with that bit of information merely websites that present the final research study primarily from larger states with large innumerable amount of bodies of waters, especially lakes in like Michigan, Maine, Florida, and so forth, where it showed overwhelmingly and unanimously that in a coefficient manner related to the value of the water or the value of property as it relates to water clarity, water quality, livability, habitat, fish, shoreline. I mean, all of those things that have to do with a standing lake and properties, private properties around, though, it showed unanimously that in every case, as the water quality, as well as livability, habitat, everything that is associated with the lake improved, as did the property values that came with it. So in other words, I've heard a lot said about what people think, what they believe, what they observe, but as a judge once said, a belief is not equivalent to evidence. And fact-based evidence by way of this research proves out without a doubt that in fact, water quality, livability, habitat, wildlife, water clarity, all of these things that have been degraded as a result of frequent use of personal watercraft and larger vessels on that lake, Beverly Lake, have everything to do with property value. And more to the point, when I have observed on multiple occasions, for instance, children taking their floating dock out to the lake, throwing the anchor out, and a bunch of kids trying to swim around the lake, and then watching jet skis zipping around those things rather quickly. You never know when a kid's going to pop up out of the water, much less where. That could lead to a catastrophic injury or even death, and God forbid that should ever happen. I had tried multiple occasions on my dock, which subsequently was had sustained problems as a result of these things to flag folks down, and was never able to even get their attention. So to try to deal with this initially, it just wasn't work. So here we are today.
Thank you. Patty?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here and thank you for your public service here. My name is Patty Schrons. Better put my glasses on so I can read what I wrote. I lived in the Valley since 1979, so I've seen a lot of changes, and I know there's a lot more to come because the Valley has been growing and growing, and I don't think there's any stopping it. And those of us that have grown up here and lived here for a long time, we've seen a lot of changes. And I believe that Beverly Lakes needs a lake management plan now more than ever. My concern is the water quality. There has been a scum line forming around the shoreline, which will get worse, and that it could affect property values because most people don't want to live or hang out on a lake that's got a lot of scum on it. And another issue is the safety. Nobody has mentioned that there is a public access on our lake. And you have to walk in about 1/4 of a mile. I mean, Beverly Lake is only 6 miles from Main Street. So it is easily accessed by people in the valley. And if you guys could do me a favor, and I'm a very visual person. So if everybody could close their eyes for a minute and oblige me here. I get so nervous talking. You're taking a 1/4 of a mile walk on a wooded trail that leads you back in time. You come to a beautiful small lake where you see a man and a small boy fishing in a little boat. Then you see 6 kids on a small raft jumping off to swim. Another look and you see a beautiful young woman with a small little girl on a kayak. And if you look again, you see a man fishing on a small raft with a couple of swans following him. Pretty soon after that, you see a couple of young grandmas trying to paddleboard. Everyone is laughing and having fun. Then all of a sudden, there is a loud noise, and it's a personal watercraft, and there's a close call with one of the swimmers. A few minutes later, there's one person out there zipping around, and everyone else has left. The end. Thank you.
Terry Dickey.
Hi, my name is Terry Dickey, Dickey. Thank you, members of the Borough Assembly, for listening to this. First, I'd like to commend the Planning Commission for voting this plan down. So much time has passed since that meeting, it's like we were put on the back burner. It really wasn't that important. Some years ago, there was an article in the Frontiersman saying that lake management plans were a thing of the past. No new plans would be implemented. That obviously didn't happen. I've owned and lived on Beverly Lake for nearly 30 years. My parents owned the property 20 years prior to that. I learned to water ski on the lake. I raised 4 children on the lake who learned to water ski. They learned to swim. We owned a jet ski for a very short period of time. And they were able to recreate on the lake. Now it's time for my grandchildren to enjoy the same benefits. Unfortunately, if this plan is implemented, that won't happen. We are a divided nation and, as it seems, a divided community. When we voted whether to institute a plan, many compromises were set forth. Yet 52% said that they didn't want jet skis, they wanted a no-wake zone, and they wanted to limit the horsepower to 15 horsepower. One owner on Cullenbach Lake, who owns 7 parcels, voted against the plan, or voted for the plan, 7 parcels. One person, that person made that plan go through. I don't think that's fair. She doesn't even live on the lake. She lives on Cullenbach Lake. It's a subdivision. Those lots are for sale. The claim was that the lake was too small. The wildlife on the lake was at risk and erosion was taking place. My family has played on this lake from both water vehicles and airplanes. My husband's a pilot. It's too small. No, it's not. Let me tell you, when the wind comes up, the erosion or potential for erosion is on Mother Nature. Sometimes we get 100-mile-an-hour winds on that lake. If property is clear cut all the way down to the bank, erosion is going to happen. Perhaps planting some shrubs would help. As for the wildlife, there's always been wildlife on the lake. This past summer, an eagle took claim to some of the wildlife. Loon babies, swan babies, again, Mother Nature. The wildlife thrives on this lake. A solution to this problem is a compromise. We tried that. We were working out a compromise in that last public meeting when all of a sudden at the very last minute, it was thrown in, oh, we're just gonna let them have their choice and then it's gonna be the compromise or it's gonna be no plan at all. Well, the people that didn't want a plan voted no plan. No compromise was ever brought forth. So it's either yes or no. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Brenda?
Hi, my name is Brenda Davis. My grandparents were the very first people to purchase and buy on Beverly Lake. They bought their property in 1966, and we are 5 generations that have inhabited and used that property, which are the N3 lots on the lake. Kelsey said that LMPs are for rapid growth and development. We don't have rapid growth and development. The lake has had the same number of lots since the lots were divided. So there's not more people or more houses or more anything. We spent months coming to these meetings, and it's basically because one person got the bee in the bonnet, and then it kind of spun out from there. But the truth is that no one has ever been hurt on that lake. There's never been an arrest on that lake. There's never been a DUI on our lake. There has never been a death, a drowning, a police report. There's never been any of those kinds of things. It's very quiet. There's been over the years planes, snow machines, and all the other activities that they're mentioning, but people don't get hurt. They're doing the what if, or God forbid, or it could, but you could do that anywhere. And I just want to say that the homes were purchased knowing that it is a motorized lake. And if somebody wants to live on a non-motorized lake, move there. Thank you.
Diana? Dan. Gary. Yeah, please, thank you.
Hello there. Well, my daughter just pretty much summed up how I feel. My folks bought the properties way back when. My kids, my grandkids, and now my great-grandkids are learning to water ski and stuff on the lake. And when they came around with that petition a couple of years ago, I was very upset about it. And I did not sign it. And I told him I hoped that it didn't go anywhere, but apparently it did. So I'm just here to tell you that the newbies kind of come in, want to change things, and I don't think that's very fair. I think that this consideration should be given to people that have been there for years, enjoyed it, enjoyed the wildlife that is still there, is there every year. And I don't know, I live on the same end of the lake as these people, but I don't know where all the activity they were describing is. I see the whole lake from where I am. My 3 lots are right at the end of the lake, so I have a full vision. And they must see things I don't, but I'm looking out at that lake a lot of times. So, thank you.
Ma'am, would you state your name for the record, please?
My
State,
name?
yes, your name for the record. Thank you.
I'm Diane Berry.
Thank you. Perfect. Thanks. Ariel Cannon?
Hello, my name is Ariel Cannon. That's Cannon.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Anderson for the effort she went to negotiate a difficult process without a clear process to follow exactly. And thank you, Assembly people, for your thoughtful questions earlier. The fact of the matter is Beverly Lake is far too small for high-speed activity on jet skis and high-powered activity. What we're talking about here is an activity, jet skis, that's available to a select few people, or all these other activities that are available to nearly anyone. So I'd really appreciate protecting the activities that everyone can enjoy instead of a select few. The map that was shown earlier should pretty clearly illustrate that Beverly Lake is barely bigger than the small end of Wasilla Lake, the end where the beach is, the end where all the buoys are, so that the boats don't go fast through there because of people using it for less high-speed activities. The process was followed through as well as possible, even though it's not completely clearly lined out in code, apparently. There's really no lawful reason to vote it down. There is, I would concede, ideological reasons to vote it down. So I hope that we'd consider this in the process that the residents went through and give this thing a vote as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have both Jacob and Jennifer Smith. Did one person want to talk, or both of you want to talk?
Hello, Jennifer Smith, SMITH. Thank you, Assembly and Madam Mayor, if I may. My husband and I moved to the lake in 2004 and got married. We had 3 children at the time, and then 2 more came after that. So we've raised 5 kids on the lake. We probably have one of every boat. We don't have a jet ski, but we have an ocean boat, a lake boat, river boat, kayaks, and we've enjoyed the lake for 18 years. It's been such a blessing. All of us really, at the first meeting, I was so excited just to see all the faces and meet some of my neighbors that had been there for many, many years. So initially, it was just exciting to get everyone together, and really, we should just be meeting for having potlucks, not disagreeing on the 3 months out of the year that we have to play on the lake. It's a gamble to get in the water. It has swimmer's itch, so it's fun to play. To me, a jet ski is just as loud as a snow machine, but at the same time, I don't want us as neighbors to be policing each other. I realize that once the management plan would be laid out, then we would be left to enforcement. And that would mean calling each other out if in fact we were out there to test a boat, which we've done, just put a boat in, run it around a loop, pull it back out. We need to be able to do those things. I've been a lifeguard and a swimmer. My husband was raised also on a lake. We've very much water people. I was a lifeguard for many years, so I've seen the kids swim. I've watched every boat incident that's been mentioned. Again, no one has been hurt. sometimes it can look like a boat is swerving to avoid a kid if you're in one direction, but if you're looking at it sideways, there was plenty of room. He saw the child and moved out of the way. So, you know, there's a lady that water skis and she wears the red lipstick. She looks like back in the day when they would put on a show on the water. And if I never see her do that again, I will just be crushed because she's lovely. She didn't even get wet. She had her hair done, her lipstick on, little costume, and it was lovely to see. I think that we can share the lake evenly, and I think that we can come together as a community. Some of the people maybe abused it have now realized that and won't do that again. So I thank you for your time, and please consider letting us figure it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacob, did you want to speak? Okay, all righty. So that's all the people that signed up. But is there others in the audience that would like to testify on this subject? This is a public hearing on just this ordinance, so there will be a time later for other ordinances as well as audience participation. So if you do want to speak, if you want to come forth and state your name. Okay, I don't see anybody else. And Caleb, we have, okay. So I understand we have two people online. So will one of you start your testimony, please?
Hi, my name is Wendy Stevens, and my husband and I purchased, we purchased our lot and built a house about 6 years ago. And one of the things that we liked about where we bought is that we could have a motorized lake. I thought it was like the most amazing thing that we could pull our grandkids and our kids on inner tubes out there and just really enjoy the summertime. And of course, you need something to pull them on. And it just seems like if you can't even pull a kid on an inner tube on a lake, like why live on a lake like that? And in this process, I've heard our neighbors describe our lake as almost like a big lake, a big lake activities. It is a small lake, but it's never felt too small to do any of the activities that we've done out there with motorized, like we've had jet skis and we've had a little boat out there before too. But I've never noticed any decrease in any of the wildlife. We have had swans in our yard. It is sad because they had a whole slew of babies. I don't know what you call them, but one by one they were disappearing. Had nothing to do with motorized, activity on the lake. It was eagles because numerous times neighbors have noticed that the eagles were trying to get the swans' babies. So anyway, wildlife is plentiful, no decrease in it. People review the CCRs and the lake rules before they purchase a property, and then to go in and change it is just really, it's just really heartbreaking that can happen. And also the lake that is being described, our lake is quiet. Even the activity it's mostly families who are just enjoying their life out there for that short 3-month summer. And it's even grandparents are out there. Like, it's just been a very pleasant experience, and everyone's respectful to each other. And I haven't it's very quiet. It's very quiet. So when you hear this talk about this craziness going on in the lake, it's not like that at all. One other thing, when you vote for a lake management plan, it's like you should be able to vote, yes, I want it, no, I don't want it. But if you are the one that voted yes, you wanted it, then that's the time to plan. But there's no way to plan because these people, not only with their vote, yes, we want a lake management plan, they already planned the plan. There's nothing to plan. Like, there's nobody, you see what I'm saying? Like, we all didn't get any input into it. Maybe we voted no, we didn't want a lake management plan. Maybe they voted yes, they did. But their plan was with their vote. Like, the whole plan is laid out with their vote.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. The next person that's online, please.
Thank you for that. My name's Elaine Phillips. First off, I would say the most discouraging part of this entire process is what you've seen tonight. We're neighbors on a small lake. We were once connected, and this unfortunate process has caused quite a divide. Instead of being neighbor to neighbor, even the very first process where we discovered that this was in play was learning that what we thought was a connected neighbors was a process that started with a lake management plan that was invasive. My husband and I, he's a 26-year retired and disabled vet. We searched long and hard in the valley to decide where we would buy, and we knew what we wanted. This lake was exactly what we wanted. It was an managed lake where we knew we could take our grandkids and teach them what I learned when I was a young child on a lake in Nikiski, Alaska. We purchased and learned that we had amazing neighbors. We still have amazing neighbors, but this process is creating a nightmare. We are not for a plan. We can do better than this. This summer, we've seen a drastic change in the process as we, as neighbors, learned that there were concerns. There was less usage because we knew our neighbors had problems with it. There was more connection, conversation. What we should be, we're in Wasilla, Alaska. We should be knocking on doors and saying, hey, we saw your son out there at 9 o'clock going a little too fast. And as neighbors, we'd say, oh my gosh, I'll talk to my son. Or for us, as our grandkids grow older, same concept. We've had neighbors who have left lights on a little too late, and we're like, hey, could you have them off so we can watch the Northern Lights? And of course, yes. Let's be neighbors. Let's knock on doors. Let's do what we did this last 6 months, 12 months, where we learned there were concerns and we changed our actions. We can do better than this. Let's be Alaska. Let's be Alaska itself, land of the free. Let's let people who have served our country live as they planned throughout their life. We can do better. This plan is not needed. And the planning commissioners understood that as they heard us speak in the last meeting. Thank you for your guys' service.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else online, Caleb? No? One last chance for anyone that's here. If you haven't testified, if you would like to testify on this subject. Okay, I don't see any movement, so I will close the public hearing. And Deputy Mayor?
I move to adopt ordinance 22-078.
Okay, is there discussion? Yes, go ahead, sir.
I don't think there's any doubt we need to update this code. It's obviously, it's been a long time since one of these was put in place. I got a few questions. Let's see here. Is there, just help me understand this lake better. Maybe staff could speak to some of these or whatever. Is there a public launch on this lake? Is there a public boat launch? No? Okay, thank you. So everybody launches it from their own property and home or from a neighbor's? Okay, thank you. Was a non-return ballot considered a no vote? I can't remember if we covered that earlier. A non-return.
Through the mayor, a non-vote was not considered.
Okay.
Because that's how it's written in code, is that of the respondents, you need a majority in favor to move forward with the plan.
Thank you. Some of the numbers that caught me here were originally when asked if people would like to begin this process, it was 62%. And then when you got down to the end, it was 52% of non-shoreline owners that supported it, 54% of shoreline owners that supported it. So the numbers dropped, right? So that tells me that some people wanted to see a process and plan, but they didn't like plan A. they didn't like option A when that came available to them. And so, as mentioned earlier, it is a democratic process. My concern with that is, makes me happy that the United States is actually a constitutional federal republic, is we give a voice to the minority. And so with the simple rule of majority, that can change quickly, right? So that's concerning to me. But I guess I'd like to ask, Plan A, when it was presented, and I'm sure it was a lot of time and effort went into that, but was there an option for people to amend Plan A, or was there maybe when Plan A was handed out, could people select the portions of it that they liked the most? Could we get back to the 62%? I wonder if there were some minor edits to Plan A.
Through the mayor. So like I said, we had 3 public meetings. The first 2 were essentially the same, just one was in person and virtual. The second one was just virtual for people who weren't able to attend in person. The meeting outline was essentially, I went through how the borough, I went through the code and I said, here's all the things that the borough actually has the power to regulate on water bodies. And so that's Title 17.59. That's our implementation of lake management plans, and gave them time to break out into small groups, to have essentially an a la carte list of regulations, and to start wheeling and dealing with each other to come up with a consensus. At the end of the first meeting, things were actually looking really promising. People were working together. There was a ton of community connection, just in the sense of I remember there were 2 people on a table that one was like, I'm not sure if I want this, but my dock was damaged by a jet skier and I don't really want to see that happen again. And there was another person at the table that said, that kind of sounds like my jet ski and that might've been my kid and I'm really sorry. And they started to heal as a community together through that process. That was just not where people met each other at the 3rd meeting. There was name calling, there was, and it was a confusing process because we were trying to, once again, go through that a la carte list of regulations, because I was really trying to empower the community to come up with a solution on their own based on the powers that we have and that you have to implement.
Assemblyperson Sumner.
So I was going to ask the attorney, I don't have my code book on me right now, but could you read us that section about voting for these lake management plans really quick?
About tabulating the votes? It's a pretty long section.
So
about the part about only the ones that are.
It sounds like it's different from our LID process,
Yes.
but I just wanted to clarify that.
The notice, so this talks about the notice to the property
Could we
owner.
put it on the screen so other people could see it at the same time? Is that possible?
Sure, Brenda, if you want to
It's
pull
a
up.
1524-031.
What code section?
1524-031A2. I don't know if you can see that very well, or, so it's the very bottom. The notice shall state that the lake management plan will be initiated if a majority of the property owners responding to the planning department prior to the deadline are in favor of developing the lake management plan. So it's written in such a way that it's a majority of the people who are responding. So you don't count non-responses as no's. You count only those who have responded, because that's what the code directs.
Which number are you looking at on the
I'm
screen?
looking at 2, subsection 2, the last sentence in the paragraph.
Oh, thank you.
Right where that, yep, there, she just highlighted it.
Oops, sorry, went away.
There,
I can't
yep.
get rid of those dots.
I would think the clerk of the year should be able to get rid of the dots.
There, I did it. They're gone.
So just, I mean, to speak on that, the final ballot process that we developed through department policy, we just use the same standard that's in code.
Deputy Mayor?
I have a question. When
Oh,
You can take rounds.
okay. Go ahead, sir.
was Jesse finished?
Yes, Jesse was finished and the new deputy mayor wanted recognition, but he is bowing to you. So go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Rob. Out of the 14 people that did not vote, how were they contacted?
Well, we used, let's see, so the tax assessment
like certified-
records. Sorry.
Certified mail or anything like that, or just
Through the mayor, we did not do certified mail, but we did just use the tax assessment records from the borough for everybody's mailing address. So we did that. And then when I sent out the first ballot asking if people wanted it to be initiated or not, I also put in an email address return. So once I had that, I started using the email addresses, but also doing mailed notices for the public meeting as well as all the ballots. So we did a bit of both, and Facebook and the website.
so. Like out of these 14, are they out of staters that own the property, or
I
are
can't-
they current on their taxes? Maybe they're not getting their.
Yeah, through the mayor, I don't know exactly how many people had out-of-state addresses offhand. I'm sure that some of the people did. I will say that I had people who were out of state hear about it from their neighbors or heard it or gave me their email address through the petition process, and then we're keeping up that way. That had me mail things to their homes in other states that they were in. So they're,
Okay.
yeah, I mean,
And then how did it go from like 64% down to the 51% for the majority? As far as wasn't there a 64%
so
in there at one point?
I think that was the final one, right? 54%.
So through the mayor, so for the second ballot, or the first ballot, there were 59 ballots that were returned and 37 were in support of initiating a lake management plan. And then,
Pardon me.
That was the
It wasn't on
62%.
that.
Was it?
yes, so
You
that
know
was
what I'm at. In order to enact something, didn't it have to be 64% at one point and then it got lowered for borough standards?
No, there was
Threshold
62%, but that didn't have anything to do with borough standards. That just had to do with the response. And then on the last ballot, it was 54%, right? That voted in favor.
yes, through the mayor. So their final ballot was 38 ballots total, or I mean 38 ballots in favor, thank you, of option A. So really there was one person increase in ballots returned, but there was because we did so much outreach and people understood more what the plan was, more people became involved. So the overall total of returned ballots that is the reason that the final percentage is lower than the original one, because more people voted.
Right. And actually, my question is, in order to enact something, wasn't it like 64% or something like the LEDs where the you had to have 70% of the people in favor of it to pass originally, and then it got down to.
I believe Mr. Bernier is speaking about the natural gas LIDs, which were, I think that's what if
Yeah,
that helps clarify.
There's a
Someone,
difference.
someone
in-
had testified that it was 64% that had to be in favor to pass something. Then they said it got lowered and lowered every time they turned around, that the percentage of the threshold to pass this got lowered. Is that true?
I
So
don't think
through
that
the
they
mayor-
required it.
That is not true. The borough code has the 50 or over 50% for initiating the ballot. That is the only thing besides the at least 50% of shoreline, or I mean of the people within 600 feet signing the petition to get the process going. I think what people are referring to is the fact that at the first meeting, we were having a conversation of what's the likelihood of this plan moving forward and what's the political climate for lake management plans. And so I said something along the lines of, well, it would really help if there was a high majority of people in support of it. A 60 to 70% would make it a really feasible option and would make it an easy plan to talk about.
Right.
So that I think is where you're getting that 64 to 70% number. Yeah, but I mean, as far as all of the documents and just all of the work we did to show people how to vote and how we were going to be tabulating these votes was very clear about it being over 50% majority for initiating and for bringing it forward to the Planning Commission and the Assembly.
Okay. And there's a standard then of rule for one vote per property or one vote per property owner?
Through the mayor, there is a standard of one vote per parcel. So if one person owns 2 parcels, they get 2 votes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
just I think there's 2 things to consider here. So when we talk about the compromise that was tried to be reached here, when we're looking at the ballots returned, there were 0 ballots returned that chose option B, which was the compromise option. Everyone who returned a ballot chose either option A or option C, which was no plan. And I think it's important to note that when we talk about per person rather than per parcel, we have a 57% of the people on the shoreline were in favor of option A, even though it was only 54% of the parcels. It was 57% of the people. So I think that's an important thing to consider. Thank you.
Let's see, Deputy Mayor, are you next? Okay, already, Assembly Person McKee, go ahead.
Has anybody ever heard a complaint of any of these 14 people that dropped off the grid saying, you didn't contact me, I didn't know about this, and I would have voted against it, or I would have voted for it? Did you hear from any of these folks?
No, I did. Well, sorry, through the mayor. The one issue that we had with mailing was with one of our attendees here tonight. And we did make sure that she got the ballot for the final ballot packet. Her vote would have not changed the outcome of the initiation. There was enough of a gap. Not saying that that is good that we missed her, but I mean, every process is we do our very best, and that was one that fell through the cracks. She was involved in every other meeting though after that and had ample amount of time to voice concern and to vote on the final plan.
So I'm thinking if you put out all the information, everybody knows the rules, it's just like any other election, you vote, sometimes they're close and sometimes they're not. If you win, you're happy. If you don't win, you're not happy.
Right.
But that's not important. It's what are the numbers? I'm a math teacher. The numbers are what speak to me.
Yeah.
So if they're not there, I wouldn't like it if I lost. I'd love it if I won.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking that's what's going on here. Because I was just telling up all the comments, they're 8-8. So we can see that it's not a good, it's not, it's not an easy choice,
No.
but still, you got to go with the numbers. Otherwise, you could vote this thing into oblivion. And how many times you got to take the vote to land at the conclusion?
Yeah.
Just saying.
Further discussion? Oh. Assemblyperson Hours?
Yeah, this is a really tough one because, I'm sitting up here, I don't live on the lake, and I bet you're all exhausted at this point of the process. And you're telling me two really different stories, and either this lake is really quiet or it's not. So it's really hard for me not to look at the vote, as Assemblymember Hale noted, to see where people are on this. I guess my question is I remember when lake management plans came about, as a way to resolve issues, and it was very contentious when it was adopted, but seems like it has been a strategy that's worked fairly well. Since then, there hasn't been a lot of, at least on my time on the assembly, and prior to that, I don't remember them being very contentious. But as far as process, once a management plan is adopted, what is the timeline for people to come back and amend it? Is there a certain amount of time that you have to wait? And I assume there's a process for doing that.
Through the mayor, the timeline is 2 years to amend a lake management plan. It has to be in place for 2 years. The amendment process mirrors that of the initiation process. It would be another petition, another ballot, another round of public meetings before that plan would be amended.
Deputy Mayor, did you have further comments, sir?
What was the planning commission vote?
Through the mayor, the planning commission essentially voted against recommending adoption.
Do you know what the vote was?
4 yes to deny it and 3 no to approve it.
Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, did you have follow-up, sir? Okay. Assemblyperson
Okay.
McKee, go ahead.
And I'm a person who change is change, and it happens, and it's inevitable. When I grew up in Fairbanks, you could have your dogs running all over everywhere. We had a lot of unwanted litters and all that kind of stuff. So after a while, and people moved there, say, "Here's a great place. You can just kids, dogs, what the heck." And after a while, when things changed, people took a vote and said, "No, we can't do this. We have to have a leash law." So whereas when you moved there, your dog could go anywhere. Now you had to be on a leash when you went anywhere, and things changed. It's a sad thing in some cases, and some people thought it was a real good idea. So that's the same thing that's happening here tonight. But change happens because it has to happen. And I think if we would, I'm going to say it right out loud, and I've said it before, if we would stop equating the Z word zoning with the F word, and I won't go into what that means, I think we'd have a lot easier time with some of this stuff. Just saying.
I would love to have that conversation with you.
Assemblyperson has some.
Yeah, so I think this is just absolutely terrible. I mean, but we do have a process. But take for example covenants. So if you purchase a house under some set of covenants, I've never seen a situation where you could so easily modify them, where it's just have a meeting or whatever, mail out a ballot, and 50% plus one of the respondents. I mean, every set of covenants I've ever read, it's like 75% of all lot owners must approve, and there's a lockout period. And so for folks that purchased a lot expecting to be able to use, I don't know, a jet ski or motorized watercraft, I mean, I doubt that they realize that could be so easily taken away. But again, I mean, I guess we have a process in code. I think it's pretty terrible, but I suppose we have to follow it. So.
And Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
As mentioned earlier by Assemblymember Hale, when you take out the fact that one person could own multiple lots, and you just look at it as the people that live on the lake, we only asked about the respondents that live on the lake. It was 57.1% that live on the lake wanted it, and 42.9% that didn't. And so that's of the 35. There's 42 people that voted on the lake. Those 42 lots are owned by 35 people. Is that right? Am I correct? Yeah, but 42 voted. 42 of the 44 voted, correct?
Yes.
Of those 42.
I believe there was 44 lots, 35 people.
But 42 people voted, correct?
Correct.
And of those 42, there was actually 35 landowners, correct?
Correct.
And of those, 20 voted in support
Correct.
and 15 against.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So 57.1% of the folks that live on the lake voted in support of this, and 42.9% did not. As mentioned by Mr. Sumner earlier, this is not, we need to probably update this code. There's a reason it takes 60 votes in the United States Senate to override a filibuster. There's no right answer tonight, so I respect anybody's decision, whatever it may be. Probably extra to the assembly member whose lake this is in their district. As any other vote in my past and any vote in my future, when it's this close, I'm going to err on the side of liberty. So because of that, I won't be able to support this lake management plan, but I respect anybody that does vote for it.
Okay. Further discussion by any of the assembly?
This is Ron Veneer.
Yes.
I too have to say that it's usually 2/3 vote to change anything in the House or the Senate, typically, and for 51% to change so much for the other 49%, or however you want to look at it. I think it should be a higher percent, and even though it's not in code at this point, I had a vote similar to this, and it weighed heavy on my conscience because after it just affected a lot of people in different ways. So I can't support this myself. Thank you.
Further discussion? All right, Madam Clerk, I think then we're ready. I don't need to even ask if there's objection. I hear there is. So, Madam Clerk, if you'll go ahead and.
If I can get the members to go ahead and vote. Oh, hold on. Reset. If you already voted, I reset it. Please vote.
Okay, this is for ordinance 22-078. And if you vote yes, that you are implementing it. Okay,
Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bernier.
No.
Madam Mayor, it passed with Assemblymember Sumner, Yunt, and Bernier opposed.
okay. Ready?
Would it be possible to take a brief break? That was pretty intense.
Pardon?
I said, would it be possible to take a brief break? That was a little intense.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, why don't we come back? It's 8 o'clock. We'll come back at 8:10.
Order, please. Oh, okay. You know she's there?
I usually text you. I'll probably text you soon.
So are you ready to read the next
Okay,
one?
now I can.
Okay, okay. Okay, if I can have order in the assembly room, please, if you're carrying on a conversation, if you will take it to the lobby, thank you. Okay. Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Ordinance 22088, an ordinance repealing MSB 1705, essential services utilities in its entirety. If you're on the phone and would like to speak to this, press *3.
Okay, is there a staff report? Oh, he's coming, okay.
He's not as young as he used to be.
He's definitely not moving fast.
Come on, he tells me all the time about him now that he's in town, he's hiking down to the store and that kind of stuff.
Okay, Madam Mayor, members of the Assembly, Alex Strawn, Planning Director for the Borough. This is a fairly simple ordinance. It repeals an entire section of code, 17.05, which is essential service utilities. If you have a power line that's carries over 50 kilovolts, or a larger gas line that runs through the community, then it requires a public process. Essentially, it is the standards that are in the code are that you hold a public meeting and you have a public hearing if you're one of the utilities that are doing this. But there's no actual real standards for approval. It is not adjudicated by any body or by myself. We just, they have to essentially come up with a plan. They do the plan, and then they have they deliver us a sort of a summary of what they did, and it has to hold at least 2 meetings. We've had in the past 15 years, at least, since this has been around, there's only been 2 that have ever occurred, and they're both electrical transmission lines. And I think it was brought forward by Assemblymember Sumner because it really had no standards, so wanted to repeal it based on that. The Planning Commission did review this. They did recommend that this ordinance be denied and that standards be brought forward.
Is there questions or comments to staff? Okay, I will go. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you ready for me to open the public hearing? Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing on.
Madam Mayor.
Okay, just a minute, please. Ordinance 22-088. We're now in the public hearing section. We do have people that want to testify. So we have, I'm going to take my glasses off. Will Hastings.
Good evening. My name is Will Hastings. The price of proposing a public works project is dealing with the public to whom the public works project is meant to support. While service utility projects are expensive, their costs pale in comparison to the combined total monetary value of private property investment throughout our area. Projects such as these have very real economic consequences on private, commercial, and public property values. Furthermore, large-scale service utility projects done without public coordination and input required by this ordinance do not represent responsible development. Not allowing public comments does not avail the benefit of hearing testimony by Matsu Borough residents who have personal work experience in these types of facilities, i.e. essential service facilities. I myself do have education, training, and experience in these types of facilities. To state or believe that because experience of borough residents or assembly members does not exist and therefore citizens and assembly members should not have input to these projects is incorrect. The borough would be well advised to maintain a channel of communication and input open where it can obtain free information to make the correct decisions on these projects. Lastly, eliminating public input simply on the premise that will reduce costs is short-sighted and dangerous. Places such as China do not allow public input on public works projects such as these, and China has the distinction of being one of the most polluted countries on earth, with zero accountability on the part of its leadership to correct excesses. I strongly advise against repeal of 1705. Thank you.
Thank you. And Amber?
Madam Mayor and the Assembly, my name is Amber McDonough, MCDONOUGH. For a combined 50 years, my husband and I have worked as engineers in commercial construction in Alaska. We are pro-development, but oppose 2288 to repeal Code 1705 for essential service utilities. I speak for myself, not as a member of the Fishhook Community Council Board. This ordinance refers to the 2005 Borough Comprehensive Development Plan, as well as the 2014 Energy Policy, to streamline regulations in an effort for least cost utility system expansions. However, the plan's economic goal 3, to create an attractive environment for business investment, also directs the borough to institute appropriate land use guidelines and regulations that reduce land use conflicts and protect residents and businesses. The plan states that consistent standards allow the business community to better plan their investments. Land use issues are best addressed at the borough-wide level. In addition, Energy Policy 5, which the ordinance references, says provide for public participation, involvement, and comment for energy infrastructure. Why would the Assembly approve a repeal in direct conflict with its own policy? IM 22-171 justifies this repeal because the code lacks standards of approval for the borough to mitigate negative impacts. The IM asserts that by removing the public's process, utility costs for installation will decrease and that these savings will automatically get passed on to energy consumers. How confident is the Assembly that the public will see any savings on their monthly bills from this repeal? Repealing 1705 to remove any process to ensure the siting of utility projects minimize negative impacts to borough residents and properties. The Planning Commission agreed that this doesn't work and unanimously passed Resolution 2230, recommending the Assembly fail this ordinance. Their resolution also recommended that the borough develop standards of approval to guide the utilities' implementation of reasonable mitigation measures. This Assembly also agreed in October at the Joint Planning Commission meeting, voting unanimously that the borough manager develop these standards for approval to make 1705 more effective. In fact, the Matanuska Electric Association also agrees and has not requested this repeal. As such, in compliance with the borough's own comprehensive plan, the Assembly should fail this ordinance and instead develop standards for 1705 to ensure that all new utility infrastructure aligns with the interests of its residents. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on ordinance 22-088? Okay, Caleb, we have 3 people online. Okay, go ahead. First person online, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ben Rayevsky, Raevsky. Borough Assembly members, I can't believe that the repeal of 1705 is something that has made it to the Assembly. You were elected to represent people who voted for you and govern in their best interests. The fact that you would consider removing their only opportunity to have a voice, however meaningless that voice is under the current wording of 1705, is perplexing. The success of this proposal subjects people who trusted you to represent them to whatever utility provider that comes along to do whatever that utility deemed as the highest profit margin without listening to the people, who are more aware of their land values and the values inherent in the valley than some pencil pusher in an office. This whole process is to deliver utilities that those people will be buying from the utility. They're paying for it. Why shouldn't they get to comment on the process of constructing it? One recent example is a power line that this body was unable to have an effect on, going through 10 creeks in which salmon are reared, and the presence of those salmon create a $65 million a year industry in the valley to save the utility an estimated one-time $4 million. Mr. Sumner's brilliant conclusion on the effectiveness of 1705 is an A+, but his conclusion and course of action is an F-. Mr. Sumner, do you have other laws that you feel the same passion to remove due to the lack of their effectiveness, or is it just 1705? This proposal came across your desk and you decided the best course of action was to make it easier for utility companies to walk all over your constituents and remove their participation from the process? In any difficult decision affecting a large number of people, not everyone will be happy with the results, but giving them a voice and the ability to have a say in that process creates buy-in regardless of the outcome, especially if the decision goes with majority. Very similar to how we vote for elected officials. In closing, a clerical issue. The removal of 1705 creates a conflict of interest with a few of the Assembly members. 1705's removal will make the development here in the Valley increase as the utility providers will be unencumbered to spread as far as they deem profitable, which will increase the availability of developable property and the construction of roads to reach those properties. An increase in developable property would be a boon for those who own or operate home building or excavation businesses. This increase in development would directly benefit Assembly members Sumner, Hughes, Yunt, and their family. In order to preserve the moral compasses with which the Assembly members guide themselves and the impartiality of the offices they hold, they should abstain from this vote. To proceed would cast doubt on their impartiality and, by extension, their ability to fulfill the duties of their office. I do know there is a rule that says that you don't have to abstain where there's a conflict of interest, but if the repeal of 1705 and the silencing of the public is the will of the people, your abstain votes will not alter the results. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person online, please.
Thank you. My name is Pam Young. I'm a Borough resident, and I oppose Ordinance 22-088. Please do not repeal MSC 17.05. This code protects the public's opportunity to be heard about impacts and concerns regarding essential service utilities. Keep in mind that Assembly members unanimously voted to fail the ordinance to repeal 1705 and instead sought to amend this code to include standards for approval. The borough's own energy policy, item 5, provides for public participation, involvement, and comment for energy infrastructure. Without this code, how will the borough staff and governing bodies meet this policy provision or know what the public's concerns are? Without adequate input, what will be the unintended consequences of any essential service utility action? The cost of unintended consequences that were inadequately reviewed are potentially much greater than the reasonable measures that 17.5 provides. To avoid them, instead of repealing this code, please implement standards for approval. If the review process is too costly, as was asserted, where's the evidence? The public should see the data that supports this assertion. The public should review and comment on reasonable alternatives, such as reasonably specifying comment standards. And furthermore, would this repeal violate the Open Meetings Act? Throughout the borough and state review process, there are procedural standards that ensure fair and reasonable public review. Providing adequate time and consideration for public review under standards for approval assures that the borough adequately considers, quote, the will of the public, which is from the Open Meetings Act. This act states that it is intended to ensure that decisions made and actions taken are public knowledge and represent the will of the public that the governing body serves. Without 1705, how does this governing body represent the will of the public? In conclusion, please fail Ordinance 22-0-0288 and amend 1705 to include standards for approval. Thank you for considering my comments.
Thank you. Next person, please.
Yeah, hi, this is Steve Edwards, EDW, ARDS, Vice President of Meadow Lakes Community Council. I just wanted to call out a letter that the Community Council drafted and sent to the Planning Commission, and I'm just going to read a section of that letter because it affected the council directly. on this last transmission line planning. The Community Council was an active participant in the recent MEA Fishhook to Pittman transmission line routing and substation siting study, both as a member of the funding focus group and as affected residents and businesses. The existing code requirement for public outreach is working and allowed us to inform MEA early in the process about issues and benefits of various routing options. In the end, we did not get everything we wanted. However, MEA committed to working with us to reduce impacts near the senior housing. Without the Borough Code mandating public outreach, none of this would have happened, and impacts to residents would be more significant. MEA cannot be trusted to complete reasonable public outreach without the code requirement. The Alaska Regulatory Commission that oversees utilities is not involved in this level of necessary community outreach. The benefits of the outreach are to build a better project, increase transparency of process to the public, and avoid litigation costs. And so the Community Council voted to submit this letter, and I'm hoping to read it into the record for this vote. And and if we need to work on some standards for 1705, that'd be fine. But just repealing it outright is reversing the public process and taking us out of it. And that process worked very well in this last go around. So I'm asking you to fail this ordinance and work on some standards or something for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come forth and testify that hasn't testified yet? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Assemblyperson Sumner.
I move to adopt ordinance 22-088.
Okay, discussion.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to, so first I've got a couple of questions for Director Strawn, if I may, and then I'd have some comments after that.
Okay. Assemblyperson.
Mr. Strawn, you mentioned that there was only 2 projects that had ever been required to go through this particular process covered under 1705. We all know that that one of them was the Fishhook to Pittman transmission line just recently. But what was the other project?
Yeah, through the mayor to Assemblymember Hale. The other project was from the Eklutna power station into the borough.
Okay. And when all of that public process for that project had been done, did the utility company just go ahead and do whatever they wanted to do anyway, like they did with the Fishhook to Pittman project?
I do not recall that one being quite as controversial. I remember there was a lot of talk about going underground, which was not an option for MEA. But as far as the route goes, I think that I don't recall it being that controversial for the previous one.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And just a couple of comments here. First is back during the joint planning commission assembly meeting a month and a half ago or whatever it was. We did direct the manager to begin the process of coming up with some standards for some enforceable standards for this 1705. And once that process has been finished and those standards come before us, even if we don't end up adopting those standards, I think it is definitely important to keep this avenue of public engagement open. I think everybody at the table here understands, knows that I am always in favor of more public engagement, more public process to get the people involved in what goes on in our borough. And the second point it goes to what was mentioned earlier in our Matsu Borough energy policy, which was adopted in 2014, I believe. And I'll summarize briefly. It says the last sentence of the first paragraph says, therefore, it is the policy of the Matanuska-Susitna Borough too, and there's a number of bullet points here, but the policy of the Matanuska-Susitna Borough is to provide for public participation, involvement, and comment for energy infrastructure. And I think that's really important. So I do think that we should fail this repeal. We have directed the manager to come back to us with some teeth for this thing, and maybe we adopt that, maybe we don't. But I do think that this public process is very important. So that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Yes, Assemblyman Sumner, go ahead.
So I suppose I could speak to the other time, sort of, because I was on the City of Wasilla Planning Commission at the time. And so the City of Wasilla has land use powers and actually had to approve it. And it is quite contentious. The MEA was very much in opposition to what they were doing, but they did do it and required that those high voltage transmission lines be underground through the city. And so that actually did have an impact on that project. It affected the routing and it went a different route. But the borough's process did not have any impact on that. So I guess what I'm trying to do with this repeal is that I think you could either repeal this or you could adopt standards. But I think that having this on the books without any standards is the worst possible solution. Because, and I do realize that there are cases where people's input may be valuable to MEA or to NSTAR or whoever's running these utilities, but you have to realize that the level of engagement that they go out and do with the public, a lot of these people have a lot of buy-in. They don't necessarily have a lot of, knowledge, or they're not engineers or anything, but they believe that engagement in this process, and it creates a lot of angst for them, but they believe that engagement in this process is going to be meaningful, and it just isn't. And so I think that is actually very cruel. So I'm, and potentially you shouldn't repeal it, but if you don't, I think you should adopt standards. I think if you're not going to adopt standards, I think you should repeal this.
Further discussion? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I got a couple of comments and then a question for the attorney. So I'll start with comments. First, I just want to speak to the why I did not abstain or step out of the room for conflict of interest. I think in my entire lifetime, if everything I ever developed combined, if you multiplied that times 1,000, it probably wouldn't hit this threshold. So the idea that this could benefit a builder when there's only been 2 projects big enough to trigger this in how many years is just laughable. So at that, moving on, should we adopt standards? I do think that anything that we have in code, we should have standards for. It's kind of, it's almost embarrassing that we don't. A question for the attorney, is there anybody that preempts this? So the reason I'm asking this is we have a public process. Obviously, I support that. I postponed or made sure that we had a whole extra meeting for the West Susitna access because I want more public process, right? So I know that was painful. We had another long night or whatever, but the more public process, the better. But what I'm asking is, do they have to listen to us? Like if we have hundreds of people come in and say, we don't want this power line to go through here, and then us 7 assembly members say, we don't want it to go through here. Like Jesse said, we're not a first-class government like the city of Wasilla. Do they have to listen to us?
So typical lawyer answer, it depends. So even in the case with the city of Wasilla, so the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, if they impose a rule or a standard that's in conflict with any local rule or standard, then we're preempted. But it's almost a case-by-case analysis because when they issue whatever it is they issue through the commission, they can preempt us. So for the Wasilla issue, if MEA had gone to the Regulatory Commission of Alaska and said, we want you to order us that we're allowed to build without going underground, and here's where we want to go. If the Regulatory Commission of Alaska had said, yeah, okay, Wasilla would have been preempted and they wouldn't have had to bury them. You know, part of it might be, do they want to do that? Do they want to fight with the local government? Do they want to listen to the local government? So it almost becomes a case by case analysis. So it is possible, but there's nothing in the regulations that deal with this subject matter that just completely preempt us at this time. Does that make sense?
It does, and thank you very much. That's good to know. I would hope they would listen to us. I don't have a lot of faith that they would if it went that far, but just the slim hope that it could, that they would listen to us, makes me think that this should stay in place. You know, public process is important. The more, the better. I don't care how many meetings it takes. The problem, like I said, is that it's actually kind of quite laughable that we don't have any standards. So I think that's something we're going to have to adopt or work on over the course of the next however many months or whatever it takes. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Assemblyperson Nowers.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I think it does make sense to have standards. I think it will be tricky to come up with those. I don't see any reason to repeal this while we're working on the standards. I do think it's notable, or should be noted, that we don't have anybody banging down our door saying we should repeal this, most notably MEA. I think the Wasilla example is kind of a great example of where you realize you have an activity that has significant impacts on the community or the surrounding properties, and you need a venue for that. From MEA's perspective, they're looking at a cheaper overhead line, not necessarily what the community of Wasilla wants, and they respond to the ratepayers, which is a broader base. So a compromise was reached there. I think, you know, this body owes it to the property owners who are really our individual homeowners are our business in the borough. You know, that's what we do. We build housing out here. We're growing. That's what differentiates us. And those people are the ones who are paying the most of the bills, and they deserve, if they have something going in next to them. We don't have zoning. So if something's going in next to them that's going to significantly impact their use of the property or their property values, or might impact it, they should have a voice somewhere to express that. Doesn't mean the thing doesn't go forward. It means that we owe it to the people who own property out here to have a voice on something that could significantly potentially impact their property. So I see value in this. This goes along with power plants going next door. I think we need to be cautious of removing the venue that allows the individual property owner to have a voice if something is going in that, you know, might have that kind of impact. And I think circling back to, you know, transmission lines, I think whatever standards we put in place have to recognize those impacts, but have to be reasonable. MEA needs to be able to put connections in to have redundancy in their system to make sure our lights come on. So, you know, to recognize that there are utility needs, but to be able to balance that with community impacts. You know, in this case, if we're looking at fisheries, you know, maybe there's less stream, you know, just being able to have that discussion that considers all the impacts on that. So I think there's no harm in keeping this in place until we get the standards move forward.
Deputy Mayor.
One more quick question to help me understand the public process a little bit. I know ours very well because I've been involved in it before I was elected and now, but in these two projects before that triggered this, Alex, does MEA listen? Do they have a public process there in front of their elected board of directors? Do people get to go speak to them, or do they only come here?
They hold the public process through the mayor. I apologize. They hold the public process not at the borough. They held it like at schools or some other venue where they can have a large group of people come get the information and let them know their thoughts.
That's good to know. I just wanted to make sure they weren't using us as keep them away from them. Thank you.
Any further comments? Yes. Assemblyperson 2, go ahead.
I don't understand how we could have an ordinance and not have standards for the ordinance. So.
Okay. Assemblyperson McKee.
How long do we think it's going to be before the standards are developed? Because if it's going to be like 14 years, then maybe that's another thing. But if it's going to be within a year or so, it may make a difference here.
Go ahead,
through,
sir.
Through the mayor to Assemblymember McKee, we definitely can get it in front of this board within a few months. Amber McDonough has actually done a great job of sort of redlining the code and coming up with standards, giving us a starting point that we can take that as a starting point to craft an ordinance and get it before you. Shouldn't take long.
Further discussion or questions by the assembly? Yes. Assemblyperson.
So I would just say that the comments that MEA isn't asking for the repeal of this, of course not, because there's no standards and they can just check some boxes and do whatever they were going to do anyway. So, you know, I'm probably not going to be here very long, but I wish I could say that I had faith that the assembly was going to do something other than just leave this exactly as it is, but I'm not so sure that I do. And you know, if you need the impetus to write standards, I think a repeal is a pretty good one, or you could repeal it. But I think just leaving it as is the worst solution. So,
Deputy Mayor.
I have the utmost confidence that Alex is going to take this on, but I would like to, on record, maybe give direction to staff to please work on this. We probably shouldn't let it go by the wayside. And then I don't think we should vote anything up or down that doesn't even have standards. So I'd like to make a motion to postpone this indefinitely, and we'll take it up in the future after we have standards.
Okay. Is that debatable? So, Assemblyperson Nowers, did you still want to speak? Okay. Okay. So there is a motion before you to postpone indefinitely ordinance 22-088. Yes. You have objection?
Madam Mayor?
Yes. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just real briefly on the motion to postpone indefinitely, just to be clear, that basically kills this repeal for forever and until and unless somebody else brings it back to us. So I'm fine with that. It's the same thing as voting down the repeal. So I would support a motion to repeal indefinitely.
Did he ask a question or he just made a statement?
Mayor?
Okay.
Assemblymember Bernier is on the phone.
Okay. Assemblymember Bernier, go ahead.
I'm in favor of postponing until we can come up with some standards and then amend it the way it needs to be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. So is there any objection to the motion to postpone indefinitely? Yeah, okay, we do have objection.
I
Yes.
just mostly have a question. If we say that voting for postponement indefinitely is like killing it, then we'd have to start the process all over again. Couldn't we put some sort of a time certain on it? Like, and I don't know how long that would be. That would be more up to these folks. But like I said, 14 years versus a few months. I can wait a few months. Couldn't we have something that would not kill it and have to start this whole rigmarole all over again? Can we do that?
Through the mayor to Assemblymember McKee, this kills this particular ordinance that repeals this section of code.
I know, that's what I was assuming
So
it did.
to adopt standards is we're going to require another ordinance.
I thought
Not
we already
this one.
I thought that was part of the discussion that we had already asked the manager to adopt standards. So
That's going to require another ordinance, another introduction, another public hearing.
Oh,
You can't do it with this one.
I see. Okay, so where we are right now is saying we're going to table, if a yes vote would table it indefinitely. And then they come back with the standards and then we do this dance all over again. Okay,
Correct.
I'm okay with that.
Correct.
Oh, yes. Go ahead,
So-
Assemblyperson Sumner.
So I'd urge instead to table or postpone it until you bring the ordinance with standards and then either adopt that or adopt the repeal.
So you would change the word repeal then to activate or something? Once you have the standards? Further questions or comments by the Assembly? Okay, Madam Clerk.
We can go ahead and vote on the motion to postpone indefinitely. Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bernier.
Yes.
Well, there we go. Got it to work. Madam Mayor, it passed with Assemblymember Sumner 2 and McKee opposed.
Okay. The next item, sorry, I'll
You're
let
okay.
you go ahead.
You are okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
Ordinance 22-103, an ordinance amending Title 43 subdivisions. If you're on the phone and would like to speak to this, press *3.
We have a staff report, I guess.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Assembly members. I'm Fred Wagner, the Plating Officer for the Mat-Su Borough. Before you today, we have amendments to Title 43 subdivisions. This is largely a housekeeping effort with an effort mainly to clarify certain areas of code and to codify policies that we are currently follow anyways. To really if you have any questions, I can't think of anything, one particular area that's a hot topic, but if you have anything, I'm more than willing to answer questions.
Questions to staff? Assemblyperson Hours.
Thank you, through the mayor. There was a code change in there regarding open space, allowing it to be re-subdivided, provided the change is less than 2,000 square feet. And my question is, does that open it up to serial changes? Could somebody change it less than 2,000 square feet and then they come back and less than 2,000 square feet and do it over and over?
It could, but they would have to come forward and you would hear that they'd done one and done one and done one. Really, the concern was that the way the code is written, there's just nothing that can be done. If you have a small setback issue into it, you can't change it. You can't change. Now, 2,000 square feet is pretty small. I mean, it's a very small change. We didn't feel that we wanted to make it so that you could change large portions because it's open space. It's put forth, irrevocably, and that's the intention. So it was put forth by the public, brought to us and discussed, and we ended up discussing it down to about 2,000 feet so that it wasn't a no, that you just couldn't deal with you couldn't come up with an answer for something that might, potentially condemn a whole house or something along those lines. We aimed small for just a small amount so that hopefully it would not be a huge effect. And I think that, like I said, if someone tried to keep changing, it would come attention pretty quickly.
So just a follow-up question then, they would have to come before the plating board to make the change, but is there something in the code? I mean, I guess, what would allow the plating board to say, you've come here before? It says in code that you can not do that again and again. What would give the plating board latitude to deny them if they came a second, third, fourth?
I'd probably for staff recommendations, if we support it or not. And again, it would have to pass on its merits, would be how I would look at that. And I don't think that, when you're looking at, you would remedy the setback issue with the 2,000. Where did you get your next one? Did you create it further? Or did you build out into it further? Those things I think would be we solve this problem. Why do you need an additional 2,000? So the justification for it would have to be pretty strong.
I guess I just wonder, is it worth adding any language there to make clear what you're saying here? Because when I read the language of it, I didn't see any sort of, stipulation. Just says it's allowed. And it makes sense. It totally makes sense that we would allow them to re-subdivide. I just want to make it clear. So in the future, is it worth adding any language just to make that intent clear?
I think that this is why we got to such a small area of changing for the fear that it would be used to make big changes, and we don't. But I don't know. I guess I might have missed your question.
So if I may,
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor, this says open space may only be re-subdivided provided the aggregate change is 2,000 square feet or less and does not conflict with previously approved plating board conditions. I think that could be interpreted that the aggregate, like all in all, the total is 2,000 feet, not per subdivision. So I don't, maybe that could be worded better, but I think that could be worded that way.
Thank you.
Okay, no, that helps to reread it in that kind of context. So, and then okay, thank you.
Further questions of staff?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so just let me get my head wrapped around this same question. It's a pretty good question. So, for instance, if you had an encroachment into the open space, or if you had a setback violation adjoining the open space, then you could conceivably replat the lots such that the encroachment or the setback violation would go away. Is that really kind of what we're looking at here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Further questions to staff? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
One.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one other question. There's reference to private roads in subdivisions, and I was trying to pull up the change, but if I remember it right, it just kind of was about the standards for those roads in the subdivisions. You can help me recollect
Okay,
that.
yeah,
And my question just kind of was along the lines of, seems like we've had some issues with connectivity with gated subdivisions, and I just want to make sure we were thinking about that in reference to this change.
Yes, this particular change that we're doing with the private road subdivisions really stems more along the lines of, we already have in code that you can subdivide further properties. This is the first section, the first change of this section, that you can subdivide further parcels that are created in a public, or that are created in a private road subdivision using the private road as access. What we've realized is the way we've written the code, that just means you can use it for access, but it doesn't give the people who live in that private subdivision and have a share of the road an actual say in the process. It just says, yeah, you can use this road. And we got to look at it. Well, that's a private tract. It's not public right of way. So the first change is that you can use a private road subdivision for your development, but that private tract has to be included in the subdivision. So that gives all the people who own the private road together a say. They would have to sign the plat to agree with the subdivision. So one person in a private subdivision couldn't subdivide their lot, without the approval of the other members that also own a right to the private road. The next section is that when gated subdivision are outside the road service area, internal roads shall conform to the requirements of the subdivision construction manual for Pioneer or Mountain Road standards minimum. This is because when we're outside, a lot of these subdivisions on these private subdivisions that we're getting outside of road service areas, they end at nowhere. So they make these private roads, and then people are able to park on them and whatnot. But we wanted to still make sure that they hit standards that we're comfortable with, that if we wind up in ownership of them in the future, we know how they're built and that they're built to a standard. Let's see, I don't think the other stuff, we have aid as flag locks accessed by private roads are exempt from Mat-Su-Borough 2300E4. That's the section that relates to dedicating public use easements over the flags. And we can't really do that because you can't get to the public use easement because you're going to a private road. So we thought that one was pretty straightforward. And then the utility easements need to be, we don't handle utility easements the same way on private tracks. We don't manage them because we can't get to them. There's no public access to them. So they have to be done by document or outside of our process, or as we stated in the code, unless they are adjoining a right of way, or not adjoining, excuse me. No, adjoining was the correct word. That's right, not adjacent to. I discovered that adjacent doesn't actually mean touching. So adjoining.
I might have to look at that dictionary to understand that.
Yeah.
Just one follow on, if I may, Madam Mayor, is so it was the second part of that you were talking about where it said what the standard of the private road would be. And so you were talking about outside the road service areas. I apologize because I just thought I had it on my computer, but I don't. But I thought there was also a requirement for what the standard would be in the road service area, that it had to be not to the mountain or pioneer standard, but to borough standard. I apologize again, but is that part of the changes in here, or am I recollecting wrong?
I don't think there is, and that might have been, that is, let's see, those are probably areas that I think that might already exist. This is an area of code we're changing at 4320-100C. One is internal roads conform to the requirements of the subdivision construction manual for residential standards, except as allowed in this section, maybe?
The internal roads. Yeah, so that was, so just that they conform to road standards. And so coming back to that issue with these private subdivisions, and then we take them over and all of a sudden you need access through the subdivision and you've got just a goat trail. Does this change, sort of help that? So if we do have, we're saying you can have a private road, but it needs to be up to a certain standard so that it can be used for, if it's eventually needed.
Yes,
for access.
that's the feeling of having them
the
to a
intent.
standard. Now, I will state that taking over a private subdivision would be very difficult. A lot of things would have to align correctly. So many signatures would be necessary. We've discussed with law before that this was probably, it would be quite an effort, but we do assume that this will happen. And I think that has to be planned for for that case.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Further questions or comments to staff?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A question on this, on bottom of page 10, top of page 11, section 13. It says this provision of code will not require the petitioner to upgrade any road providing access to the subject parcel that is maintained by the state or an incorporated municipality. So, what exactly does that, there's no context. The rest of that subparagraph is not included, just the part that's being amended. So what is the context there? Which provision of code are we talking about not requiring the petitioner to upgrade roads that access the parcel?
Okay, this came about because we've had several issues in the past where people will look back in the history and go, hey, we put the borough put dirt on this road one day in 1975. So they've maintained this at one time or another, or the state at one time maintained a road and no longer does. So we have, they have stated that if that's the case, then they didn't have to provide an upgrade. So what we're saying is that if we are currently maintaining a road to the level that it's going to stay at, you don't have to pay, you will not have to upgrade it as a developer. I mean, it's already, it's there, it's operating, we
Right.
maintain it. And that's just basically, that's what this does, is just, it removes that, well, they maintained it for X amount of days back whenever in ancient history, or in the past, I should say.
So I guess the nuts and bolts of what I am trying to get my head wrapped around here is, so there's a subdivision proposed going in off of South Bodenberg that's supposed to tie into Republican there, and with the excess traffic, with the more traffic from that subdivision going down Republican, we would need to have a collector status road. Republican would need to be collector status, and it is not currently collector status, and it would take quite a bit of work to upgrade that to collector status. So would this say, does this basically give the developer carte blanche to access Republican without upgrading Republican to a collector status due to the increased traffic?
No, it would not. That when this only takes effect when a classification is not being changed by a subdivision development. This means that if the road were currently operating at so this is only for roads that are.
I understand exactly what you're saying. So, okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
Further questions to staff? Okay, sounds like it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing on ordinance 22-103. Is there anyone in the audience? Do we have a sign-up sheet? No. Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to testify? We don't have anybody online. Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. And Deputy Mayor?
I move to adopt ordinance 22-103, and I'd like to offer a friendly amendment right now
Okay.
that was drafted in part by staff and private sector, both of whom are much smarter than me. So I will read this into the record. I move to amend ordinance serial number 22-103, Matsu Borough 43.2.3E4B to read, be overlaid with a common access easement as outlined in the current SCM or with a public use easement. Public use easement shall be granted over the width of the pole portion and shall extend into the flag portion an adequate distance to provide for a turnaround designed to subdivision constructual manual standards.
Okay. Would you like to address the amendment, sir?
I would. I'd like to have Fred speak on behalf of it, please. As stated before, he's a little,
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This came about, this process actually took a couple of years. We started addressing these items, I believe, in 2019. And then the subdivision construction manual rewrite came up. And so we put this stuff to the side. One of the big things we wanted to take care of was this section of code in the flag lots that requires the dedication of a public use easement over a flagpole portion. Now, at the time, we felt it was a good idea. We wanted to ensure that if properties were large enough, they could be subdivided in the future, and these people would have ways to access. In practice, we found that some developers were liking it, but a large majority did not. For one, it made your flag portion driveway a public right-of-way, a public use easement. And then, so we were looking at trying to fix that, and the initial thought had been to just do away with it, not require these public use easements. And as myself and some of the members in the private sector were going, well, this is a good tool for the developer that does want to plan for the future and be able to divide maybe some of these larger flag lots. And so maybe what we should do is provide an option for both. So we have a common access easement, which was something we created during that subdivision construction manual rewrite, thinking about getting rid of public use easements. I feel that this gives the developers an either or. If someone desires to make their lot so that, we want to leave big lots and we don't want them divided in the future, we want to keep that, that's kind of your right. Now, we know that we also look for planning. We're talking about years and years down the line, changes in ownership. So we don't prohibit it. I mean, it can still be done. And really, if property values become such that it warrants doing it, people will find a way to get the additional right of way if they don't have a public use easement. Again, I think this just provides the option to the developer, another tool in the tool shed, and I think the either or really solves our problem for the long term.
Okay, discussion on the amendment. Any objection to the amendment? Okay. Discussion then on the ordinance 22-103 as amended. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'll just say that thanks to the staff for bringing this forward and private sector that participated in it. We spent thousands of man hours. I say we, I was a part of the process. Sorry, I got some in my throat, but 3-4 years ago. And I really actually feel like we have an unbelievable SCM. We're building really good roads out here, but no matter what, you're going to have some minor edits and housekeeping issues. And that's really all this is. So it sounds pretty involved and scientific when you read it, but it's to these guys, it's super simple. And if the staff agrees with it, I agree with it. So that's all I got.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion as amended. Any objection to passing the ordinance as amended? Okay, seeing and hearing none, the legislation passes. Go ahead.
Ordinance 22-129, an ordinance approving an appropriation of $375,000 from the Greater Palmer Fire Service Area fund balance to purchase a new pumper tanker with accompanying resolution 22-110, a resolution approving the scope of work and budget to purchase a new pumper tender for the Greater Palmer Fire Service Area. If you're on the phone and would like to speak to this, press *3.
Staff reports, sir, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Assembly members, and staff. Ken Barkley, Director of Emergency Services. This is to replace a tender for Greater Palmer. The tender in question is a 1990. Originally, we were going to try to get it refurbished and try to go that route as we do with our ambulances. As we got into the process, we found out it wasn't going to be much of a cost savings, but we couldn't even find a company that would engage with us on this because of the age of the apparatus. So we were stuck with purchasing a new pumper tender. So this will replace the 1990 tender that we have in place now. It's actually out of service. We can't keep it in service. It's too old, can't get no parts. The other part of this is, as with the other ones we're getting, we're looking at a minimum of 18 months to even get this apparatus. So we're trying to get ahead of it to purchase this. And this has been approved through the Greater Palmer Fire Service Area. And they do have the funds to do this. We're not asking for any money, additional funds to do this.
Okay, questions? The staff. Okay, seeing none, thank you. Go ahead and open the public hearing then on our ordinance 22-120 and resolution 22-110. Anyone in the audience that would like to testify on these two items? We don't have a sign-up sheet. Okay. Have anybody online, Kim? No? So seeing and hearing no one, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. And Assemblyperson Nowers, would you move the legislation?
Yes. I move to adopt ordinance 22-129 and resolution 22-110.
Okay, discussion? Any objection? Seeing none, then the legislation passes.
Ordinance 22-130, an ordinance accepting and appropriating a grant from the Alaska State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for equipment and training with accompanying resolution 22-111, a resolution approving the scope of work and budget for Alaska State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management grant for equipment and training. If you're on the phone and would like to speak to this, press *3.
Staff report, go ahead, ma'am.
Through the mayor to the assembly, Cheyenne Handel, finance director. This is an accept and appropriate from Homeland Security for equipment purchases. The equipment includes generators for fire stations, mobile generators and heat trailers, and training for staff.
Okay, questions to staff? Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing on ordinance 22-130 and resolution 22-111. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to be heard on either this ordinance or this resolution? Have anybody online, sir? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And Deputy Mayor?
I move to adopt ordinance 22-130 and resolution 22-111.
Okay, discussion? Any objection? Seeing none, then the legislation passes. Madam Clerk?
Ordinance 22-132, an ordinance accepting and appropriating $75,069 in additional project income from the rail extension project from Port McKenzie to the main line, with accompanying resolution 22-113, a resolution approving the scope, work, and budget for additional project income for the rail extension project from Port McKenzie to the main line.
Okay, staff?
Through the mayor to the assembly. Cheyenne Hinder, Finance Director. Annually, we bring forward ordinance for you to accept and appropriate. What we anticipate is rental income, property income for the rail extension. This ordinance just trues up the numbers that we had previously brought forward and recognizes an additional $75,069.
Okay, questions to staff? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, I will open the public hearing on ordinance 22-132 and resolution 22-113. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address either this ordinance or this resolution? Do we have anybody? We do not have anybody online. Last call. See no one move. Okay, I'll close the public hearing. And Assembly Person 2, I guess, it's yours, sir. Right after you filled your mouth.
I guess I move to adopt the ordinance 22-132 and resolution 22-113.
Okay. Discussion? Is there any objection? Hearing none, the legislation passes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go
You had to
ahead.
know. Yeah, I object.
Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
I don't know that it's necessary for me to discuss it because I've already played this tape before, but I object to.
She's objecting, so we need to vote.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have
So
to vote
I'd like
then.
to call a vote.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and vote then.
If I can get the members in the room to go ahead and vote on this ordinance. Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bernier.
Yes.
It passed with Assemblymember McKee opposed.
Okay.
Ordinance 22-134, an ordinance accepting and appropriating $10,500,000 from the Matanuska-Susitna Borough School District and reappropriating $3 million from the school debt service fund for the Mat-Su Central School construction project, with accompanying resolution 22-114, a resolution approving the scope of work and budget for the Mat-Su Central School construction project. If you're on the phone and would like to speak to this, press *3.
Staff, please.
Through the mayor to the assembly, Cheyenne Heindel, Finance Director. This is the final amount of funding needed to start the project for Mat-Su Central. The school district has agreed to give us $10,500,000, and we are reappropriating $3 million out of the debt service construction fund. That $3 million will ultimately be paid back to the borough once the building is occupied. So the total project, because the resolution associated with it sets the total project amount at $22,700,000. And hopefully we will get this out to bid soon.
Okay, questions, just the staff?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So there's $3 million from the school bond debt fund.
Mhm.
And then there's 3.4 million from the local assistance and tribal consistency fund. As part of this deal, the 3 million is the part that would be paid back through lease payments, or what's the total that would be paid back through avoided lease payments?
Through the mayor to assembly member and hours. The 3 million is what will be paid back to the borough. The 3.4 million came from a grant that was approved at the last assembly meeting.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We've gone through a couple iterations, so I was just trying to keep track.
Further discussion or questions to the staff? Okay, thank you. So I'll go ahead and open the public hearing then on ordinance 22-134 and resolution 22-114. Comments, testimony from anyone? Have anybody online, sir? No, nobody online. So I'll close the public hearing. And Deputy Mayor?
I move to adopt ordinance 22-134 and accompanying resolution 22-114.
Okay,
And I'd like to speak to it.
sure, go ahead, sir.
How exciting.
Yeah.
Our school board and assembly both had to give a lot on this. I know Cheyenne had a lot of time helping structure it. I appreciate that. There's 2,600 plus students inside the borough that attend a homeschool program that the money doesn't stay in the borough, and I think this gives us a good chance to recapture a lot of those. Not to mention, we're spending a lot of money to lease this building, and now we're going to own it with zero debt. It's pretty exciting. I think it's moving in the right direction as far as future mill rates go and in fiscal responsibility. So, yeah, I'm excited about it.
I agree with you. I think we all are excited. Further discussion? Any objection?
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that this is really awesome. We're gonna get a new home for these kids out there in Matsu Central, and this is gonna be a great thing. I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Didn't mean to cut you off from a discussion, sorry. Any other discussion from assembly members? Okay, any objection? Okay, seeing and hearing none, the legislation passes. Ooh, guys, celebrate. Okay, next item is audience participation, and we have one person signed up, but if you didn't sign up and you still want to testify, you'll have that opportunity. So, Brian?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Mr. Manager, members of the Assembly and staff. I want to talk about the land use permit. So landowners, primarily those that own some property, want to build on their property, et cetera, in the past have rejected this primarily because of it's just been a waste of time. They have to come in, they have to they make a couple of squigglies on a piece of paper and then give the borough some money, which goes nowhere. So the other issue is control. They don't want people coming to the borough, or they don't want to go to the borough and then wait for somebody in planning to say, okay, it's all right for you to go build your structure. They want to be able to build it when they want to be able to build it. They bought the land, they own it. It's not yours, it's theirs. So if the issue is just finding out whether or not someone owns the land or someone has a project going, I can tell you that if it's managed correctly, these people can find out whether you're building or not. I mean, I had somebody walk over my brand new slab just a couple days after it was put in. So I know they can find you. It's very easy. If they don't have the resources, you got pictures. You fly airplanes over the houses, take pictures, and know where everything is. And you can buy that from the state, even if you don't do it from the borough level. So in addition, I think you guys have drones. I haven't checked up on that, but that's a possibility. And, so home visits, pictures from planes, possible drones. I mean, you guys can figure out whether somebody has a structure on their property or not. It's just a matter of doing it. I say leave these landowners alone because they own the land. Remember, you do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to testify under audience participation? It can be on any subject that's on the agenda or any subject that you would like to bring to the attention of the assembly. Oh, yes, yeah.
Thank you. Good, Jim Stocker. Thank you, Mayor and staff and Assembly. I'm here for two issues here tonight. Number one, I came here Tuesday night. Nobody left the lights on for me. So I decided I'd go home and come back again tonight. I wanted to talk about the borough code as it refers to air quality. And there's, I believe, a really large hole there that needs to be filled. There was an event that took place on the 29th of last month, right behind my home. There was a very large burn. The burn actually blacked out the sky over my house. It was one of the largest burns and smoke that I can actually recall in the last 40 years. And I've lived here in the Butte area for about 40 years. When that happened, I started taking a bunch of photographs and I took videos, and I did what I could that way. And then I called the borough. I called code compliance, and I tried to get in touch with somebody to get them out there. There wasn't anybody available at all. I then called DEC. They said there was nobody available with them. They told me to go on their website and fill out a complaint form. So then I drove over to the Bodenberg Loop and I took more photographs. I went over to the Plant Material Center, State of Alaska, and there was 3 gentlemen in there, and they're like, this is unbelievable. From there, I went back home. Actually, I climbed the butte, took some photographs from the top of the butte, went back home, and from there, I started contacting people after hours. I contacted Tim Hale, our assembly person. I talked to him. He contacted some people here at the borough. And then I finally got to talk to somebody at the borough in the air management area. And when I told them what happened in my concerns, they weren't very receptive. They basically told me that there wasn't an inversion that day when I told them there was. They told me that they didn't believe there was smoke like I was describing it in what I showed them in the photos. They said that they believed it was water vapor over top of the river, which I found kind of amusing and kind of condescending at the same time, because as a pilot for 40 years, I can tell you all about weather and all about vapor and all about particle matter, smoke differences between vapor. And then it gets a little bit more complicated than that, but with the event that happened, when you look at the code, and I looked at the code, there's absolutely nothing in there to prevent that. There's nothing in the code to prevent totally engulfing the whole Matsu borough in smoke. I know that sounds insane, but they can do that, and there's nothing they can do about it. I talked to the fire chief, I talked to the borough, I talked to DEC, I talked to everybody, I read the code, and the event that took place was just unbelievable. And I have photographs. I would encourage every one of you to look at them before you leave, or I'll ship them to you by way of an email. And I know my time is up. Real quickly, I think that what I'd like to do is get together and form a workshop and take a look at the code and amend it so that we can, fix this problem, because it was a really big problem. And I wish I had more time, but thank you, and I appreciate your attentiveness here.
You said
If
you
anybody
had-
has any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
You said at the beginning you had 2 concerns. We'll give you another
Oh,
couple minutes to-
this was the main concern.
Okay.
Actually, the first one was the lights were out.
Oh, that was
Yeah,
just.
okay.
Oh,
And
'cause
the
we
second
had-
one
we
was
stood
this
you
issue
up,
right here. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Anyone else that would like to? Oh, Jim, your glasses are on the podium. Mhm. Anyone else?
I have 400 more pair at home, and they're on the same pile where I can't find them.
Anyone else that would like to testify in the audience participation? Okay, seeing no one. We do have no one online. Okay, we will close audience participation. And Madam Clerk?
Resolution 22112, a resolution approving the permanent location of Midnight Sun Family Learning Center at Midnight Sun Tract A, the current location of the school. Resolution 22115, a resolution approving the revised project budget for emergency services facility in Palmer. Resolution 22117, a resolution approving the addition of a regular full-time utilities facilities maintenance labor position and eliminating the existing on-call position with the Public Works Department, Operation and Maintenance Division, Talkeetna Sewer and Water. AM 22140, approval of change order number 1 to contract 2278PB with the Boutte Company Incorporated for the Lakes Boulevard project. AM 22144, approval of the Assembly regular and joint meeting schedule for 2023. And AM 22145, awarded bid number 2334B to Happy Trails Incorporated in the contract amount of $125,649.40 to construct Phase 3 of the Ridge Trail.
And my apologies, before the clerk read all of these, I was supposed to ask if the assembly had anything to pull. So my apologies. Does anybody have? Okay, don't see or hear anybody. Okay, so Deputy Mayor, then if you will move the.
I move to approve the consent agenda as read into the record by the clerk.
Okay, thank you. Is there any objection? No, hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. So, Madam Clerk.
Unfinished business, ordinance 22104, an ordinance amending MSB 1702, mandatory land use permit, and with accompanying resolution 22082, a resolution amending the schedule of fees for MSB 1702, mandatory land use permit.
We currently do have a main motion on the floor. I believe, is there an amendment that we have? Okay, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
I move to amend section 2 of ordinance 22104 by striking paragraph 7 and 8 of subsection A. And if it's okay, I'd like to have staff come and speak to it.
Okay.
Trying to go a little faster this time. I'm wearing my winter boots. That's why I'm a little slower.
You need to put in your budget those, those wheel things that you just stand on and it just,
That's what I'm talking about. Let's do it.
Probably wouldn't cover it. Workman's comp, right? But, you can.
So, I mean, is the question what this amendment would do?
Go ahead, sir.
Alex Strawn, Planning Director for the Borough. This amendment would make the mandatory land use permit voluntary in most cases. Where it would not be voluntary is if you're building some building within 75 feet of a water body. Otherwise, people can come in and voluntarily get one of these permits. If you aren't sure if what you're doing is in accordance with the regulations, you could come to the borough and get this piece of paper that says, yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion? Yes, Assemblyperson.
Madam Mayor?
Okay. Can you hold just a minute? I just recognized.
Madam Mayor, I was going to ask if we could have the amendment read one more time. I don't have a copy
Have
of
it
it.
read one more time? Okay, all right. Go
I
ahead, sir.
move to amend section 2 of ordinance 22104 by striking paragraph 7 and 8 of subsection A.
Okay, and then someone asked a question online. Oh, Assemblyperson Hale, go ahead.
This looks like it basically makes this voluntary action, which is probably fine. But maybe we should not call it a mandatory land use permit. But that's kind of beside the point. This thing is $50, and if you go and you get it, and the borough planning department will review your plans and tell you if you have some type of issue that is going to violate setback requirements, or if you're going to have an encroachment onto a neighbor's property, or if you need a different style of permit, like say if you need a multifamily housing permit, and this could really shortcut a lot of issues that we see with folks who, they build this home, and next thing they know, they're 60 feet from the lake instead of the 75, and now now the borough's breathing down their neck saying, what are you going to do about this? Or for instance, specifically in my neighborhood, there's a bunch of tiny houses going in just off of Maud there, and they have violated the setback requirements, and that violation of the setback requirements is causing problems with their getting a multifamily housing permit. And if they had simply, gone to the borough, if this was in place and they had simply gone to the borough and showed them their plans and said, hey, can you take a quick look at this? The borough could have said, hey, not only are you going to need a multifamily use permit, but also this building here is violating setback requirements. So you might want to do something different, because you're not going to be able to get that multifamily permit if you're violating the setbacks. And so I think this would short circuit a lot of issues like that. And making it voluntary, that's fine. We could do that.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was coaching during the last meeting and had to call in for it. And I could just, Assemblymember Hale and Sumner both had a lot of good questions and concerns that night. This was why I asked to postpone, so we could take it up again and I could work with Alex on this. Members of the public do call in, it sounds like quite often, and ask for help. And there's no real process there. It's just, they get a super friendly staff, as always. I can tell you that from past experience before I was here, but there's not a real process for them. The land use permit was in place years ago. I didn't have an issue with it. It didn't bother me or any of the builders. In fact, the Matsu Home Builders Association stance on this is that they would like to see the land use permit come back. But me being a lover of liberty, I just wonder how many people are going to pay to save one person, right? Like if we build 200 houses, does one person make a mistake? I don't know. It's not that many. And so I don't see a need for a mandatory land use permit, but I think this is a good compromise. If somebody wants to get a land use permit and pay their $50, that's not very much money, then they get all the staff's help that they could ever imagine and more, right? And so it could help prevent some of them from making a mistake. So anyways, I think this amendment brings it all together. It doesn't force it on anybody, but it offers the process to anybody that would like it. So thanks to the staff for getting this together.
Yeah. Assemblyperson Hours.
Thank
and
you.
then Sumner.
So yeah, I think the goal of this is to make those unintentional mistakes not happen. So that people know about the rules and they don't end up unintentionally violating them, and then it's kind of a big snafu. I guess I have a question maybe for legal. So if somebody voluntarily gets a land use permit and, the staff in all good honesty says, this is in compliance based on the squiggles that you've put in there, but then when they built, maybe the squiggles over 10 feet and they're in a setback violation, is the borough, because we gave them a land use permit, saying that they're forgoing any violation that should occur?
Go ahead, sir.
That is the subject of no less than 2 or 3 chapters in the land use treatises up in my office. It's very, very, very complicated. But in most situations, so certainly not every one of them, the result would be that the borough could not go either issue citations or try and enforce the land use regulation against the person. However, under the laws of this state, other people can, and a lot of times people are like, for a water body setback, that doesn't mean you would be able to get a variance. So the borough would be somewhat, I see Alex jumping up, so go ahead, weigh in. If you get a determination and you act in accordance with that determination, again, some of the times, not all of the time, the borough would be stopped from enforcing against it. And I'll let Alex jump in and say where I got it wrong.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I agree with Nick if we mess up. But if they say that they're going to be, 30 feet from a right of way and they build 20 feet from a right of way, I don't think they have an estoppel argument. I think it's if we miss something and we give them that piece of paper, then we'd have a difficult time.
Absolutely.
enforcing.
That's the way I understood the question. So if they say I'm building 20 feet within a right of way and we say you're good to go, we're not going to be able to go and issue citations or enforcement orders for building within 20 feet of a right of way.
Okay. And then one quick follow-up question. So when somebody calls and they ask, what sort of requirements are there for me to build? Are we just going to make sure to tell them that this option exists? It just seems like we want to make sure that people know it's an option.
So I think,
Go
through the
ahead, sir.
mayor, yeah. We would definitely be telling people that this option exists. And if there's, we would still help people if they have a quick question or whatever. But if they have a complex question, if they have some development and they want to know, I want to know about setbacks, I'm in a spud and there's this and there's that, then we'd say, you know what, we have this process. It's a easy form, $50. We'll process it within 15 days or whatever it is and get it to you. We'd be directing people to the land use permit instead of writing a long email or whatever. And that way, as it is right now, it's a conversation that we have and we'll let them know that they're good to go. And we may not have all the information that we need to really actually make that determination. Having a land use permit would ensure that we do have that information. And it would also get rid of this this whole thing that people say, like I talked to somebody at the permit center and they said it's all good to go. And we ask, who did you talk to and what did they say? This would, create a paper trail and have a formalized process.
Assemblyperson Sumner.
So for $50, I can get like a free review and the borough would be stopped from pursuing claims against me. I'm definitely going to be doing this.
If it's approved.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's
But if
denied,
it's not, I can just do it anyway.
well, but then you're on notice.
Yeah, that's true.
Then we could potentially seek punitive damages against.
Well,
you
that's
because-
the whole point of the review is that you not do things that would be right. Yeah. No, I actually think this is a really good idea. So, yeah.
Okay, further discussion on the amendment? Any objection to the amendment passing? Okay, any further discussion on the main motion as amended? Any objection to the main motion passing? That's ordinance 22-104 and resolution 22-082. Any objection to that passing? Okay, hearing none, and the legislation passes. There are no vetoes. Go ahead.
Introduction for public hearing on December 20th, Resolution 22-103, Resolution 22-116, Ordinance 22-136, and Ordinance 22-137.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
I move to introduce the legislation as read into the record by the clerk and set the public hearings for December 20th, 2022.
Okay. Is there discussion or any objection? Hearing no objection, the legislation then is introduced. The next item is a vacancy report. Deputy Mayor.
I move to confirm the mayor's recommendations as follows. Agriculture Advisory Board, Lamar Anderson, with terms beginning January 1st, 2023. Animal Care and Regulation Board, Terry Dennison. Library Board, Georgia Konozovich. Parks, Recreation and Trails Advisory Board, James Jones and Kenny Linden. Plating Board, Eric Cohen and Sandra Krieger. Fairview, RSA number 14, Craig Stewart. Greater Willow, RSA number 20, Thomas Phillips. And Meadow Lakes, RSA number 21, Stephen Edwards.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
That's RSA 27.
Did I type it wrong?
I thought he said 21.
I apologize if I did.
Mhm. Okay, any further?
It says 27. Okay, sorry.
He's just very protective down there. He's afraid I'm going to pull something on him. Okay. Any objection to the vacancy report? Okay, hearing no objection, the vacancy report is approved. There are no new businesses, there is no referrals, and there's no reconsiderations. And we do have an executive session, but we'll go ahead and take comments at this time. So Assemblyperson Sumner, comments tonight, sir?
No comment. Thank you.
Assemblyperson Nowers?
Getting down to your last opportunities for that. I had just 3 areas. One is the AML conference is going on. The mayor was at that for the Conference of the Mayors. Lots of good presentations and a resolution that I hope goes through that asks the state to fund unfunded mandates like senior disabled exemption. So that was great to go to. I have one issue. I would like some kind of report on what's happening with our mailings. It seems like when we mail things to the property tax records, we're getting things kicked back, and which surprises me because people have to pay their property tax records. So just some kind of insight into what apparently makes that happen and maybe how we can fix it is something I would just love to see. I hate for people to not receive the mail if it's a natural gas LID or some of these other issues. And then the clerk had asked for some feedback on our elections meeting that's coming up. And I had 4 things that I was interested in. One is knowing the cost of the hand count and the time. So now that we've had that experience, what that looked like. I would love to have a state person there to talk about the issues with the voter rolls and how they make sure the absentee ballots that people aren't allowed to double vote, and the issues that people have discussed with ballots being sent to addresses where the person no longer lives. I would like to know if there's less costly tabulator options than the Dominion machines that we could look at, something that with less bells and whistles that we could consider. And then lastly, to be able to talk about or have some insight into what the procedures are going to look like for the hand count at the precincts, particularly with regards to sort of security and safety for the ballots, and then for the people at the precincts. And just, I know all the details, we can't lock down the details, but just kind of knowing, since we haven't done that before. And in particular, what I'm thinking about, if it's helpful, is when I watch the hand count here, you and the deputy clerk were here in person, and I watched the volunteers frequently just have a question or two about, mostly reassurance that they were doing something correctly. How is it going to work at 40 some precincts for when questions come up? So I'm trying to envision in my head what that looks like, and having an idea of how we plan to go about that would be of most help.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, comments?
Yeah, in tonight's introductions, there's an ordinance coming forth in 2 weeks, 22136. I have a minor concern that I'd just like to state, and then we can work on this as the weeks go by or whatever, but I'd like to get it on record. So it comes back to on-site consumption for marijuana. I would normally not have anything against this at all. We have on-site consumption for alcohol. We can have a drink at a restaurant with dinner or lunch or go out to a bar at night. And I really do think marijuana should be treated the same as alcohol. But my major concern right now is that inside the state of Alaska, there's no threshold to determine when you're intoxicated or not. So with alcohol, it's 0.08. I think when I was a lot younger, it's 0.1. The state of Colorado marijuana has been legal a lot longer than it has in Alaska. And their state legislature has adopted a threshold, and it's 5 nanograms per milliliter. So I don't know. It's concerning to me just in regard to the fact that we don't have anything for the police officers to be able to use. I would sponsor or hopefully co-sponsor a resolution to maybe amend our legislative priorities and ask that the state legislature actually do put something in record. I talked to the chief of police in Wasilla this week about this and a couple state troopers and at, the meat and potatoes of this, they wouldn't be against if they had a way to, they had a threshold to determine right from wrong. And so that's my concern with it. I just wanted to get that out there on the record and hopefully we can work on that. Thanks.
Assemblyperson 2, comments? Assemblyperson McKee? No? Assemblyperson I'm sorry, Mr. Attorney, comments?
Nope.
City manager, borough manager, comments?
Just real quick, just to call the Assembly's attention to the 2 resolutions that were introduced for the next time, rates and fees and the CIP. So if you have thoughts, changes, things like that, this is to give you a couple of weeks to digest that and allow for the public hearing. So I would encourage you, if you have requests of staff, to let us know that in advance. It'll probably facilitate a better process on the 20th. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, did you? No. Okay. Assemblyperson Hale online, do you have parting comments, sir?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. So lake management plans. Tonight's vote on that lake management plan was probably one of the more difficult ones that I've ever taken on this body. But we do have a process in place, and in this case, the requirements were met. However, I do think, as was stated by Mr. Sumner, that the requirements are not very good. When we look at other things that can be forced on folks who do not want it, like LIDs for gas or for paving your road or whatever, where you're going to be required to pony up for an improvement in your neighborhood that you don't want. We have a requirement that it is going to be that the vote needs to be 50% of all the ballots that were sent out, not just the ballots that were returned. And it seems like in the case of these lake management plans, that is not the case, and it's just a simple majority of the people who respond. And I think that we need to take a hard look at that and see if maybe we should change that requirement to be more reflective of how we do LIDs, because clearly, in this case, you had a simple majority, a pretty strong simple majority of the people who responded, and an even stronger simple majority of the individuals that responded, not necessarily the parcels, but if you had applied the requirements for the LID, this lake management plan would not have passed, because there were 84 ballots sent out and 38 in the affirmative, which is only 45% of affirmative votes out of the ballots that were sent out. And so, I do think that that's something that we need to take a look at. Maybe I'll be getting with the attorney to address that. So that's pretty much all I got.
Okay. Parting comments, Assemblyperson McKee, you have some now?
Yeah, I changed my mind. I was going to, is it Kelsey Anderson? Yeah. Your research, your meticulous attention to the fidelity of the process was absolutely amazing. And I don't know that even if, regardless what one's personal thoughts are about which way it went, I'll tell you what, you carried the day just with the idea that it's pretty hard to argue with what you did. So congratulations. I don't do this very often, but good job, girl.
Okay. Assemblyperson Benir, go ahead. Parting comments?
Yep. So I'd like to wish Jesse the best and good luck in all your endeavors. And I want to take and pray for the borough. Dear Lord and Jesus, please forgive us for our sins. Thank you for all the blessings that you bestow on us. Thank you for the help that you give us. Thank you for the love, the forgiveness, sending your son to forgive us for our sins. May we all think of you in this timeless season of love and joy. May you keep on our hearts the thought of the less fortunate, that we could some way be a blessing to them. May you help those who are struggling with addictions and other immoral things going on. Lord, we just want to thank you and love you, and thank you so much. And our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
So before we make the motion to go into executive session, I need to have someone make a motion. Oh, it should be Deputy Mayor.
I move to suspend the
Okay.
rules and extend the meeting to 10:30 PM.
Okay. Is there any objection? Because we have a mandatory adjournment at 10, and we should be in executive session at that time. So that's why we're extending it now. Okay. Any objection to that? Pardon? Sure, yeah, we'll go ahead and have the deputy mayor move us into executive session, and we'll take, 5 minutes till we move to the other room, et cetera. So,
I move to enter executive session for matters which the immediate public knowledge of would clearly have an adverse effect upon the finances of the borough, and matters which by law, municipal charter, or ordinance are required to be kept confidential, and to discuss matters involving consideration of borough records that by law are not subject to public disclosure, and discussion of matters subject to attorney-client privilege, in particular to discuss potential arbitration with the Matanuska-Susitna Borough Employees Association. Those in executive session will be the mayor, the assembly, the manager, the attorney, and the clerk.
is there any discussion? Is there any objection? Okay, so we are going in at 9, 50?